All right, ladies and gentlemen, I will call the General Committee meeting to order. Tonight's General Committee meeting is being held with members of General Committee, the Executive Management Team, Deputy City Clerk, and the City Clerk in the Council Chambers, and it is nice to be back. Members of the Senior Leadership Team and other staff are available to answer questions. A number of them are available via video conference, and I know Councillor Aylwin's joining us tonight by video conference as well. The chambers is closed to the public for now until further notice. We hope that's not too long from now. We do have a large number of items on the General Committee's agenda tonight, and in the true tradition of local government, covering a whole bunch of ground on different and important issues. We will go through our consent agenda before we get to the one presentation tonight, which is of the Community Energy and Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan. We'll do that in just a minute, but first we'll run through the consent items. If you wish the item to be held for discussion tonight, please indicate. If it is not held, the motion that is printed on the agenda is deemed to be approved on consent, and we'll go forward to City Council at our meeting March 28th, next Monday, for final approval. The reports of reference advisory or special committees tonight. The report of the Finance and Corporate Services Committee from March 1st is to be received. Finance and Corporate has recommended a couple of motions, or one motion. That's with regards to the Waterfront parking permit update. Hold please. Held by Deputy Mayor Ward. I think I heard you first. We have the report of the City Building Committee dated March 8th. That's to be received. City Building Committee's recommended a motion, and that is with regards to the public art program for 2022 temporary project and the maintenance budget allocation. Holds on that. That is approved. Staff reports tonight. We have, first of all, the Community Energy and Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Plan adoption. So hold that. Yep. Deputy Mayor Ward, presentation. Next, we have the investigation to construct professional grade pickleball courts at Hayneswood Park. No holds. It's approved on consent. Next item is with regards to needle collection kiosks and public access naloxone kits, the pilot programs update.
Hold please.
Held by Councillor Natalie Harris. We have the Facilities Planning and Development 2022 capital funding. Staff report. No holds there. That is approved. Last, we have an item regarding an agreement with the Royal Victoria Regional Health Center, that is to do their cardiovascular rehabilitation program at the Allendale Rec Center. An interim basis anyway. No holds. That is approved by General Committee. We have a number of items for discussion that have been placed by members of council on the agenda tonight. The first was placed by Councillor Jim Harris. It's with regards to parking restrictions on Tomlin Court. No holds. It's approved. The next one's also placed by Councillor Jim Harris. It's with regards to establishing a youth council in the city of Barrie.
Like, hold that please, Mayor.
Held by Councillor Mike McCann. Next item is with regards to Ryan's Hope Breakfast to Go program.
Hold that please, Mayor.
Held by Councillor McCann. And the next item is with, sorry, that was put on by Councillor Natalie Harris. The next item is also put on by Councillor Natalie Harris. It's with regards to a grant for Cornerstone to Recovery. Hold by Deputy Mayor Ward. The next item placed by Councillor Kungle is with regards to the, or a Nature Berry bird friendly designation.
Hold please.
Held by Councillor Jim Harris. We have an item regarding the Hartberry landmark sign put on by Councillor McCann.
Hold, please.
Hold please.
Sorry, who was that first?
Councillor Aylwin.
Oh, it's Councillor.
The mysterious voice.
The void. Disembodied voice of Councillor Aylwin held the item with regards to Hartberry landmark. Thank you, Councillor Aylwin, wherever you are. And finally, we have an item put on by myself regarding school safety.
Hold please.
Held by Councillor Gary Harvey. All right. So we will go through these items in turn once we complete the presentation. 3 staff reports, or at least one motion from committee, 2 staff reports, and I think all but 1 item for discussion were held. But first, and importantly, we have a presentation tonight by staff concerning the Community Energy and Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan for the City of Barrie. We have had a very broad range of stakeholders participate in this plan. It is many years in the making. And so we're going to give a bit more than 10 minutes for this presentation. There is a lot to talk about. And I see Adam McMullen has made his way to the podium. He is our Manager of Energy. And he's being joined virtually by representatives of the Simcoe County Environmental Youth Alliance to provide the presentation. So Mr. McMullen, congratulations on all this work and for getting to tonight, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to present in person. This is really great. So I'm allocating the first 5 minutes of my presentation to representatives of the Simcoe County Environmental Youth Alliance. Lucy Duncan and Rosa Yu will be presenting. So I'm going to pass that to them virtually. They're in a Zoom link somewhere, and I believe we can facilitate that through IT, I guess. The benefits of virtual versus personal worlds here.
Just while we're bringing them into the Zoom call, I should have mentioned off the hop that been a few technical issues with the Rogers feed tonight. I know that folks watching at home are seeing the council-wide picture here, not the Zooms, or at least the close-ups. You're used to seeing the different camera angles. Hopefully the sound and videos coming through, but that's for tonight anyway, and we will see what happens in the future. But that's the view on Rogers as well tonight. There won't be any of the close-ups that we normally get. Are we able to get the Simcoe County Youth Alliance into the call? There they are. Good evening. Welcome to City Council.
Thank you. Do we just start?
Yes, please do, Lucy.
Perfect. Hello, my name is Lucy Duncan. I am 16 years old. I'm in the 10th grade, and I've lived in Barrie for my whole life.
Hello, my name is Rosa Yu. I'm 17 years old and in grade 11. I have lived in Barrie for the past 5 years.
We are both organizers with the Simcoe County Environmental Youth Alliance, a youth-led initiative here in Simcoe County, working to amplify youth voices in conversations surrounding climate and to bring climate justice to Simcoe County. As young people, we are terrified of what our futures could look like if all levels of government do not take immediate action to address the climate crisis. In Canada, municipalities have influence over around 50% of all greenhouse gas emissions, which is why we need to take action locally here in Barrie.
In 2021, our alliance organized the Imagine Barrie campaign. We shared information to educate the public about the greenhouse gas reduction plan and to encourage youths to use their voices. We organized a rally at Barrie City Hall to ensure that the council hears youth voices and implements our perspectives while developing this plan.
The Imagine Barrie campaign gave youth a platform to completely reimagine how Barrie's future could look. We want to see a walkable city where no one has the need to even use cars, a circular economy where trash is not even a concept and everything is reused and shared, and a city where supporting our most vulnerable citizens is central to our ideals and where systems exist to ensure that everyone has the support that they need.
Taking inspiration from our vision for the city, we formulated a list of demands for the city to incorporate into the plan. We are pleased to see how some of our ideas were highlighted in this plan. For example, the active transportation section, which is a resolution for making roads more accessible to non-car users, and making public transit more accessible and affordable for daily use definitely incorporates our ideas. The circular economy section in the draft also aligns with our support of a sustainable economy based on reuse and recycle.
The Simcoe County Environmental Youth Alliance has reviewed the draft plan for the Community Energy and Emissions Reduction Plan, and we are in support of its contents. The next step for the city is to ensure that this plan is passed and that definitive action is taken to ensure that its contents become reality.
The many promised contents discussed, such as improving Barrie's building infrastructures, more active transportation methods, implementing circular economy to combat waste, and mixed land development, are the very first substantial steps towards a better future proposed by the city of Barrie. Working towards a better future must center around the youth. and who are truly the future of Barrie. We would like to remind the council that as we approach our voting age in just a few short years, decisions made today will not be forgotten. We will observe the further applications of this plan to inform our votes when the time comes.
The city of Barrie declared a climate emergency in 2019, but almost 3 years later, we have yet to see concrete action taken. We no longer have time to make excuses to avoid action. As per the Community Energy and Emissions Reduction Draft, Barrie's greenhouse gas emissions are expected to increase by 40% by 2050 compared to 2018 levels if we don't take immediate action. This is not acceptable. To continue business as usual is to doom the youth to a future of environmental devastation and climate chaos. The time to act is now, and change starts on a local level.
We implore the council to keep the youth of Barrie in mind as decisions surrounding this plan are finalized. Thank you for inviting us to speak today. We are in support of the plan and are eager to see its impacts throughout Simcoe County.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy and Rosa, for taking the time and for reviewing the plan and providing support for it. I've been amazed when I've reached out to the youth, especially this group, about how sophisticated and articulate they are. I almost want them to do the presentation on my behalf, which they kind of have. So it's a good start to kind of move forward with this. I'm going to quickly go over what the objectives of today's presentation are. And the main goal here is to solicit support from General Committee for endorsement of the plan, is laid out in the staff report, provide some highlights, talk about enhance some awareness on climate action, and I want to focus on implementation in the next steps. I presented to General Committee about a year ago, and a lot of this front-end content is very similar. So I'm going to race through this. I have a limited amount of time, and any questions that come out of it you can ask, but I want to get to the next steps and implementation. But quickly, Council has provided support through funding this plan. There was a bit of delay in the initiation because of grant fund and change of government, but we got rolling in about 2019. There's strategic priorities to look at climate action within this current council timeframe, and finally, a climate declaration was issued in 2019. This is a quick summary of the last couple of years of developing the plan. The first chunk of it was looking at getting the data and soliciting the information we needed to establish a proper baseline for energy and emissions and what a business's plan scenario would look like. And then a good chunk of time was related to establishing the plan, the vision, the principles, the actions, the strategies. And then finally, I'm here, it seems many years later, to bring it forth for council for endorsement, or sorry, General Committee. So the main vehicle for engaging the community was through the establishment of a stakeholder advisory group. So this group had representation from different entities in the community, environmental groups, institutional entities. We had representation from Councillor Alwyn as a council representative. And this group was the main vehicle by which we developed the plan and bounced ideas and ensured that we're capturing all the things we needed to. So that advisory group met over 18 months, 7 times. We also had a great public engagement plan, but then COVID hit. So we threw that out the window and we had to go virtual, which has some benefits, but some drawbacks as well. We had some surveys, we had a public information center. And then when the plan was in draft form, we did some additional stakeholder outreach to kind of capture some of those entities that weren't involved in the stakeholder advisory group. That's when I reached out to some of the youth, which was an amazing experience. We got a lot of feedback there, reached out to some businesses through the chamber and tried to get some feedback from entities that we didn't capture otherwise. So to jump into the plan, the summary that we did, the baseline shows essentially that the majority of emissions from the community come from private vehicles and buildings, 95%. And the baseline that we use is 2018 because that was the best data set we could have based on the timing. And there's some key findings that the business is plan scenario and the emissions inventory showed. I'm not going to go through all these, but the main ones are there's nearly $600 million in energy being spent every year in the community, and the great majority of those dollars leave the community. Private vehicle transportation and commercial vehicle transportation account for 55% of emissions. The building sector accounts for 40% of emissions. And as previously mentioned, the businesses as planned forecasts will show an increase emissions by 40% by 2050. The key thing here is without strong action, the emissions, the community emissions will significantly exceed federal targets 2030 and 2050. And to do a graph, we're going like this, and we need to go like this to get to our target. So there's a big gap there in terms of if we don't do anything or take action. Quick summary of the framework of the plan is pretty traditional. So you start with the vision and principles, and the stakeholder advisory group was very effective at developing these. Again, the main highlights are their economic benefits to pursuing climate action. There's a link between the environment, social and economic benefits. There's co-benefits to having all those improve. We consider evidence-based and best practices when developing strategies and actions and implementation. So then you move into from vision principle to the big moves, and these big moves kind of tackle the different areas in the community and the different emission sources. The first big move we're going to discuss is buildings, and buildings represent 40% of emissions from the community, and the goal is near zero emissions in new and existing building stock. The two activities I want to focus on are a deep energy retrofit program. That's one where you look at the existing building stock and you try to incentivize homeowners and businesses to undertake retrofits to reduce their energy and emissions. And then the other focus is a green development standard, where you essentially look at future growth and you try to ensure that you're low or zero carbon with that development so that you reduce your emissions in the future. The next big move, and the one that has the biggest impact on emissions, is transportation, 55%. And the goal is near zero emissions from transportation. And I kind of want to describe these in like kind of two buckets. One is, how do we modal shift people from the passenger vehicle? So how do you get people from independent driving around? So you focus on activities like active transportation, public transit, all of those things to move people away from the passenger vehicle. And then for those who are still driving, you look at electrifying your vehicle, so EV adoption. And that's what these actions tackle. The next big move is waste, and you have a goal of waste reduction through a circular economy. My colleagues are working on this strategy, and although it represents a small emission component of the community, it has other benefits, and reducing waste will have a benefit when it comes to emissions reduction. And then the final big move is related to the natural environment and land use. And this kind of looks at the built environment versus the natural environment. And when we grow, we have to ensure our built environment is more compact, higher density, and that will help improve the whole building transportation aspect of the community. And then more and more importantly will become our natural assets. As we get closer to 2050, those assets will become carbon sinks. So the last goal is kind of tackling those two components of the emission profile of the community. I missed putting in a slide here. I forgot to put the target in. The emission reduction target that we have put in the plan is net zero emissions for the community by 2050 and 45% reduction from the 2018 baseline. So that aligns with the federal targets that we're moving as we were developing this plan, and ensures that we're aligning with international targets as well. So I've just done a fire hose of information about what the plan is kind of made of, but I want to focus on implementation because I think this is very, very key right now. And I guess the quoted phrase there is city-led and community supported. So what that means is that the city has to take an enabling and administrative lead in ensuring that we can have an implementation framework that allows for action, but we need the community to be there with us. And this graphic shows a number of action tables that are established, and essentially those action tables will be focused on enabling the big moves. And their goal will be to promote actions that are in the plan, kind of sit as like an advisory entity. So you oversee what things are coming out. How can you influence those to ensure that you're tackling the big moves? And then there's an internal working group that looks at what are the city-led actions in the plan. And this kind of comes to step back a little bit. When it comes to greenhouse gas emission reduction, there's a plethora of things you can do, right? And within the city, there's a myriad of different opportunities. So I kind of want to bucket them where One bucket is city-led action that we are responsible for, that we will take, we will resource and implement. And a good example is a deep energy retrofit program. So those activities in plan, the city would lead. And then you have another bucket where the city is an enabling has an enabling function. So we have a lot of legislative and policies that we implement and manage. And by ensuring those have a climate lens, you can create like an environment that makes these actions succeed. So the idea of like the official plan, when you develop and enable official plan that promotes active transportation, you're indirectly like improving the greenhouse gas emission reductions. So that's another kind of bucket. We were in the enabling function when it comes to our legislative requirements as a city. Another bucket is we're partner with people or organizations and entities. So if there's groups that want to do something, they can leverage some of our resources perhaps, or we can assist them. And then finally, there's a bucket where the community is just going to do their thing and they're going to reduce emissions. So you kind of look along that paradigm of where we are. And that's where this plan is showing that there's an implementation framework. We need to do our part. We also need to enable all the things we have to in terms of supporting these action tables and then all the policies and other items that are needed. The question is, what is this going to cost? Would come up as from many people who've reviewed this plan, and the scope of the plan didn't allow us to go into each of the activities and say this strategy is going to cost this much. It would be too daunting and it would be too much of a scale of work. But what the plan promises and what we are recommending is that any city-led action that we want to do, staff want to bring forward, or say the internal working group, we'd bring forward to council as part of the business plan, and then or separately to ask for those resources to move forward. So if we want to do a green development standard, we scope that out. We either put in the next year's business plan, or we come to council and say, hey, this is what we want to do. One thing I want to identify is that all of this establishment of these action tables and administratively managing them would require resourcing, and kudos to council because you approved a permanent resource to do that in 2022 operating budget, which I'm looking to hire a climate change coordinator. So had that not been done, I would be asking for that resource now. So that's excellent. So there are some immediate actions and next steps. I kind of referred to these in the previous slide, but essentially we want to establish some action tables. We need to get an internal working group going. We need communications and engagement protocol and program. We need a monitoring and reporting protocol. We need to investigate the establishment of a carbon budget. And we need to implement the big moves that are city-led right away. And those are the development of a deep energy retrofit program, which I've already started, and initiate the development of a green development standard. So that's a very, very quick presentation. I just want to thank the working groups, or sorry, the stakeholder advisory group for all their efforts, and the project team that assisted me in doing this, ICLEI and Lura, the consulting groups, they're amazing. And then just a few words here. This plan is ambitious with its targets. And as we heard from Rosa and Lucy, we have to take action right away. There's an economic business case here to move forward. There's $600 million of money. The majority of it leaves the community. There's embedding these decisions as in our business practices will help to keep those dollars local. And then finally, the corporation itself has to lead by example. So when we are growing our services or doing things, we have to ensure we're looking at net zero carbon emissions. And part of my work plan is to develop that strategy as well. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam. I know this is just scratching the surface of so much work that's gone into this over several years. And thanks to you both for being here on behalf of the Simcoe County Youth Alliance as well. And I know having met with you just how committed to this issue you are. And I'm really glad to see that this turned into a bit of a partnership in the sense of being able to contribute to our plan and give the young people of Barrie a voice in this plan, but also that you'll hold us accountable to it. And I appreciate that because plans are just the start and there is a lot here. So I'm sure there are questions from members of council. Members of council as well, with your permission, I'd like to deal with this staff report now after the presentation. So that means you can ask questions on the presentation maybe first, but also on the staff report. Are there questions for Mr. McMullen? Councillor Congo.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Mr. McMullen and Lucy and Rosa. I have to also add compliments because your group has also engaged the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee, where you've got many engaged community stakeholders around that table. So I had a couple of questions about your timelines and task groups, and recognizing that the 3 task groups that we moved for the precinct, the theater, and affordable housing, I felt worked really well with a very specific timeline and focus. Is there an intention tied to the tables you presented on, Adam, that actually initiate those tables within a time frame with an objective over the next year? Or how will these pressures from the need for us to get going actually shape when those task groups and those tables are formed? And I'm assuming that really those 2 key objectives are the focus of those collective tables.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Congo. So our initial focus is going to be on establishing the action tables in the building and transportation group, sectors, because they're the largest emission sources. And we want to do that immediately. I'm hoping to have a resource hired in the next couple months. So I'm hoping that they're up and running within 3 to 4 months. And then we start moving through, because it takes a while to establish them and it takes a while for them to get rolling. So that's kind of the time frame there for that. And the internal working group, I'm hoping to have a similar time frame by year end. We'll have something up and rolling fully when it comes to establishing those working groups. When it comes to the internal city-led activities, I'm working on the deep energy retrofit program. I'm hoping to have something in the 2023 operating or budget request related to that. And then the other action I need the resource to start moving forward with.
And follow up. Thank you for that, because I know I saw the closing of the coordinator position, and it's good to hear that that's in progress from the climate change perspective. My other question really is about if you could clarify more around the intention when we say city-led. And you spoke a bit about that, but I recognize the wealth of information from our community representatives on various community tables, and also seeing our youth this evening. And so I didn't know, while you say city-led, is that specific to just city staff and then kind of moving out from a buy-in perspective with other public stakeholders? Or how will we continue to keep that broad table that you've done such great engagement with informed?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Congo. Great question. City-led, I tried to quickly describe what that is, but essentially those are activities in the plan that the city will resource and implement directly. So an opposite example of that might be EV adoption, where there are going to be activities in the community. There's market forces that are going to drive that. We aren't necessarily identified as the lead for EV adoption, but we are also that we're identified as like supporting role to ensure that there are policies and procedures that allow for people to adopt EVs. The idea is that those action tables will serve as the mechanism to maintain those partnerships and collaboration. So you have the building action table, you have the transportation action table, you meet with them regularly. They have connections to the community, and that's how you keep the kind of the momentum of the stakeholder advisory group moving, because they're a very effective entity.
Thank you. I have no further questions, just compliments again. And hopefully, I'm looking at the way in which you engaged in the project, and I think it's a great example. While we're going to talk about the youth council and committee, what a great way in which you've presented to us how valuable that is and the role around them leading into the presentation. So my compliments to your approach with Lucy and Rosa.
Thanks, Councillor Congo. Councillor McCann.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and thanks, Mr. McMullen. I guess I want to echo a few words that Councillor Congo said, that, I really do believe, that investing in our youth is one of the best investments we can in the future. And you bringing in the youth and having Rosa, you and Lucy Duncan as representatives, is a very strong foundation. And I think we've got a very secure future in this task. But I guess I have some questions for you. This is a lot of information. I know it's not I guess it is a broad subject, and it's a lot to take in and a lot to process. And maybe if you don't mind, I'll ask you some direct questions. If you know the answer, that's okay. But just like to get your kind of your elevator pitch on some of these questions. I guess before I ask the question, I love this slide here on page, it doesn't say any page, the plan highlights. And it says, without strong action, the community emissions will significantly exceed federal emission targets in both 30 and 50, right? And I just have some questions about bullet point 2 and bullet point 3, where the second bullet point was that $600 million we spent on energy, and then the majority will leave our economy. I wasn't crystal clear on how we can keep some of that money in our economy.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Council McCann. A perfect example is fuel. So you put gas in your car, you drive away. That fuel is processed. Oil comes from somewhere, it's processed in a refinery, and it gets put in your car. If you say had a solar panel in your house and a charger in your garage, you could conceivably charge your fuel with your own solar panel. So that's an example of an investment that someone can make personally to fuel their vehicles. So that's kind of the idea, is that you have in particular transportation, but you also have energy in the form of natural gas that's brought in regionally that you burn to heat or do whatever with. There's options that you can be more efficient with that energy and reduce the energy demand and also generate energy.
So that's $600 million that essentially Barrie could get a piece of. You're saying that instead of buying gas from a gas station and then going down to Toronto to work or et cetera, you could develop that energy here in Barrie locally, save some money and keep some of that millions of dollars in our economy. Is that one example? And I'm sure there's many more. Okay, that's kind of what I thought. And then maybe the last question that I have, or sorry, second last question, is in bullet point 3. So the average person spends just under $4,000 on annual energy cost and 7 tons of emissions. That number seems like really high for me. What is the average person spending $4,000 on reducing their emissions a year? Some examples.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor McCann. So that's a combination of transportation and your household energy. So if you consider, if you own a house or you rent a place, you have an electricity bill and you have a heating bill that could be up to $100 a month kind of thing. So you quickly add it up, that's $2,000 to $3,000 potentially in energy for your house. And then the cost of driving. So if you have a vehicle, and those energy and fuel costs, in particular right now, that they've risen. So that's the mix there, and it's an average number. So you can imagine the population divided by the total, that's what you get. But that's what that's generated from, is a mix of transportation costs and the energy for buildings.
Okay, didn't want to go too far down the rabbit hole. It seemed high, and I'm glad that it's that high. I guess the last question I have for you, just with your presentation being so dense, right? Like depth, you know, if you got the magic wand and we gave you the money today, what are 3 projects that you'd start right away?
Well, sorry, through you, Mayor Lehman, to Council McCann, the number one opportunity for the community is to electrify vehicles. So that may not necessarily be on the city per se, but that could be through other partners. And right now, like at $1, I paid $1.70 for fuel there the other day. A lot of people who are on the fence for the economics of getting electric vehicles, it makes a lot of sense right now. So that's one. The other one is conversion to heat pumps. So a heat pump is essentially a piece of equipment that can use electricity to heat and cool. It's very efficient, and you can replace a natural gas system that uses fossil fuels. So that's a large opportunity to reduce emissions. And then the other one is incentivizing those people who wouldn't otherwise do home retrofits. So a lot of people will replace a furnace, will do activities in their house. And those are the times when, if you provide some incentive and opportunity, that's when they can make a change. And it's not that much more expensive, if expensive at all.
Yeah, okay. And you do bring up natural gas quite a bit. And are you in fear at all that the crisis that's going on in Europe is going to hit North America?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor McCann, energy prices are always fluctuating. When I started, natural gas was 45 cents a cubic meter, went down to 25 cents a cubic meter. Now it's back up to 35 cents. So those international influences obviously have an impact on energy. It does make a case that why generation is a benefit, but I can't really comment on where the price of, fossil fuels is going to go because of the conflict.
Yeah, I can respect that. Adam, thanks for your presentation.
Thanks, Councilor McCann. Councilor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Mr. McMullen, how can we empower yourself and your department division to getting a little bit more teeth behind some of these things? So kind of piggybacking off Councilor McCann's question, electrifying vehicles. A lot of that has to do with policy-driven initiatives we can do at City Hall, such as requiring new builds to have rough-ins in the garages for single-attached homes, in mixed use, such as the one I believe at 70 Dean Avenue, finally breaking ground in Ward 9, where they committed to actually doing it for certain aspects. So how could we give you a little more teeth with that, as well as fleet? So leading by example. So the city of Barrie has a lot of fleet in bylaw, in enforcement, in Barrie Police, which is technically the city of Barrie, but its own entity. Barrie Fire comes to mind. So how can we really empower you? Because I'm glad to see this. I'm glad to hear that you can provide the conditions and provide education, but I would like for there to be a little bit more of, less of a suggestion, more of a directive for these different, at least city departments to at least look at the numbers and see if it's feasible for them to take these initiatives.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councilor Morales, thanks for the question. You touched on 2 points there. One is community-focused activities, and another one is corporate-focused activities. And the quick reference to the community activities when it comes to like electric vehicle adoption and making that easier. One of the actions is a green development standard. The unfortunate aspect about that is we don't have the regulatory teeth to necessarily make that a requirement. So you can have a green development standard that incentivizes activity. The city of Toronto has their own ability to have a green development standard that's much more robust. And I think a potential benefit and advocacy to upper levels of government to have a provincial-wide STEP program that has requirements for development would be great. But that's our limitation on that angle. When it comes to corporate activities, there's a huge opportunity for greenhouse gas emission reduction. And one of my activities in my work plan is to do a net zero carbon strategy for the corporation. I'm not responsible for fleet, but I do work with my colleague Kelly Oakley in asset management. They've done an alternative fuel study, and I know they're working towards the idea of inventorying and understanding the fleet and then moving forward when it comes to converting from gasoline to electric vehicles. So I'm in support of that, and I'll help them however they need. And it does touch my group because we track all the electricity. So that's one thing we'll be looking at when we convert.
Perfect. Follow up on that one. How long would it take you to do a study for fleet? So I know in the past, many people here on council, but specifically Councilor Alwyn and myself have pushed to get some studies done, to look at the numbers. Sometimes there's progress. Sometimes they're buying smaller vehicles, more hybrid vehicles, but actual electrification of product is already exist. It's existed since roughly 2016. How can we make those happen? So for example, I know Barrie Fire replaced a bunch of fire prevention vehicles with smaller, more efficient Mitsubishi SUVs and other vehicles, but there's some opportunity to maybe replace 2 more in the coming time. How can we make sure that's not a missed opportunity? Because I don't want to be in a situation where we go, oh, we could have done that, but they've already been purchased. Is there something, at least from a council perspective, that we can empower you to have those conversations, or does it have to really come from the department leader, head, et cetera?
So go to Ms. McAlpine on that one.
Mayor Lehman, through you to Councilor Morales, council has adopted an alternate fuel fleet strategy, and it's in process of being implemented. So that's already been dealt with by this council this term. So it's already being implemented, and Balla's team is leading that. And so it's already got steps planned for what types of vehicles get replaced with what alternative fuel sources and the priority vehicles.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. McMullen? Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Mayor Lehman. Through you to Mr. McMullen. Thanks so much for the presentation, and great. And no disrespect, but I would love to hear from the youth of one thing they would love to see implemented immediately. Something that we can do that's tangible and something, you know, whether it's for homeowners or this council, something they would like to see.
Lucy, want to go first, and then Rosa?
Sure, I'll give it a shot. There's like so many things. I'm just trying to pinpoint one that I think would be particularly useful. I think something that might be helpful is more electric vehicle charging stations all around the city, particularly like at gas stations, just to make owning an electric vehicle a more tangible thing as a starting off point. But obviously, further into the future, I would love to have an established transit system that makes it so that we don't need to use cars at all.
Thanks for that. Rosa?
I think Adam also mentioned this earlier, but I am actually for the deep retrospect program, a retrofit program, mainly because energy conservation is very important to our buildings infrastructures, especially in the South End, where we see a lot of new developments and more condos being built, where mixed land use is also being like considered into action. We also have to consider about how like deep energy retrofit can play into that while we're already constructing new areas and new districts and residential areas.
Perfect. Through you, Mary Lynn. Thanks so much. And just to thank you both for, and the rest of the group for taking the time. And it's so nice to see the youth being engaged. And funny enough, the presentation comes on a day where we've passed to look into a youth council, so I think it's great, and keep up the good work. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Aylwin.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. And thank you, Mr. McMullen and Lucy and Rosa for being here this evening. I'm with you, Lucy and Rosa. I am terrified about where we're headed as a world. I mean, I'm 28 years old, and I have been thinking about these issues since I was your age, and have seen the lack of action from all levels of government year after year. So I'm with you on that. Thank you for being here. I do have a question for Mr. McMullen. Being part of the stakeholder advisory group was a great experience, and we got sort of a closer look at some of the data around emissions reduction targets and the business as usual scenario versus what the projections, if we take the steps in this plan, would look like. I'm wondering if you have any of that information available for us this evening. I found the graphs that showed the upward trajectory of where we're headed versus what we could do if we implemented these steps very sobering. And I like to start from a place of looking at the science and what the science requires from us in terms of the actions that we need to address climate change. So I'm wondering if you have any of that data or those graphics available for us this evening to see. Or if you can speak to it.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Alwyn. Thank you. I believe IT has a slide that shows the graph of a business's plan versus what our strategies would look like. So I think we can bring that up, and it kind of gives you an idea of the stretch as we move forward, how much further we get away from our emission targets. So this quickly shows the big moves pathway, the red line, the target from the IPCC is applied there, and the black line shows where we'll move to. So there's a widening gap as we move out. And essentially, it shows that our big moves have a bit of a gap between the targets we've established. So when you model out all of the activities, there's a slight gap. We acknowledge that. And as we reiterate and refresh this plan, we'll have the ability to narrow that gap moving forward.
Thank you for sharing that. This is what keeps me up at night. This is what I talk to my therapist about, graphs like this. It's scary seeing that black line. That's where we're headed. That's the current path that we're on. And even with these ambitious steps we're proposing in this plan, that only gets us to where that red line's going. And then those blue dots are what the science requires of us to avoid catastrophic climate change. So we have a lot more to do. So a second question for you, Mr. McMullen. What, if any, what opportunities exist right now to accelerate this work and get us on the path to really moving forward with those big moves?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Alwyn. I've mentioned previously, but the biggest opportunity for emissions reduction is the conversion to electric vehicles. A big portion of that pie is transportation in general of passenger vehicles. So in many cases, the market will help with that because people are going to see the price of fuel and they're going to make changes on their own. The other major item is moving residential houses away from natural gas and onto efficient heat pumps. So the deep energy retrofit program, which I keep referencing, that and highly incentivizes heat pumps would go a long way to start to reduce that emission profile from residential houses. And we've started that process of initiating what that program would look like. We've partnered with the Clean Air Partnership to do a characterization study that will allow us to apply for FCM funding in the future. And so we're moving that forward as this plan was being developed, and hopefully with the climate change coordinator role coming on, we can accelerate that even quicker.
Okay, thank you for that. My last question is around the idea of a carbon budget and sort of accountability and reporting on the data and the progress against this plan. I think that's such an important piece of this that we need to know where we're going and how we're doing. So what does that process look like in terms of developing that carbon budget and reporting that out?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, the Councillor Alwyn. Thank you for the question. I manage the corporate energy budget, and I have a budget for every single utility that we pay for. And it's an amazing tool because when something varies from our consumption budget, you immediately have to look, why is it doing that? And then you can take action. So a carbon budget is a similar activity where you allocate an amount of resource over time, and you say, have we used that or not? And if we vary, why did we vary from our target? The challenge with the carbon budget for a community is that it's very cumbersome to get the data. So it took us 6 months to get the data to develop the 2018 baseline. So to roll over a carbon budget is challenging at this time. That doesn't mean there's not new technologies out. There's some sources of data that are turning over in real time that we may be able to access to promote that. But ultimately, what we would do is we'd allocate a budget of carbon, and then we'd understand either year over year or every other year where we are, and then we can try to pinpoint where we're not achieving our targets. And that's different than a target. A target is we're going to hit this number at a certain time. A budget is we have this much to spend over this period, and it's a much different mentality because if you have only so much to spend and you spend too much too quickly, you have less for later. And I believe in the plan, it says if we continue on our business as planned scenario and we were carbon budgeting, we'd run out of carbon by 2032.
Okay, thank you for that. Ouch, that last comment hurt. So thank you again for the presentation. Thank you, Rosa and Lucy. On a more positive note, I really like the approach that you took with Imagine Barrie, imagining what a more livable future would look like, because that's what all of these actions are about. It's about creating a better future. So thank you again. Take care.
Thanks, Councillor Owen. Next, I have Councillor Jim Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. And I also echo the thank you to Rosa and Lucy. And I know we haven't confirmed a youth council committee, but thank you for providing good reason why we should with your valuable inputs. Just, again, and I'm not losing sleep over this, but I am trying to become more informed in this area. And I've recently been reading a book by Stephen Poloz, who's a former governor of the Bank of Canada, talking about the age of uncertainty as it relates to the economy, and certainly covers climate change in that book. And so, he talks about the potential of carbon capture and sequestration. And I know in item strategy 14, recovering energy, we talk about the methane and recovery at the waste station. Can you talk a bit about, or maybe this is a little bit off, but if I'm learning, so how this sequestration and carbon capture is part of our plan and future?
Thank you, through Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harris. Great question. It's an emerging, I don't know if it's emerging science, but technology. So sequestration is essentially the natural environment can take carbon in. So we are in our community, we have natural assets that do that. So one is to protect those assets, and secondly, you can enhance those. Our plan doesn't take into account the modeling of what sequestration will look like in the future or how we should manage that. It's a bit early in these types of plans to start implementing those kind of pathways, but they are there. And as we get to 2050 and as we get through 2030 and our numbers are, we have a little gap to get our numbers down, those are going to become more important. So in terms of carbon capture, I'm not too familiar with it, but I understand there are activities in particular in the mining sector where you can capture your carbon, you put it underground and it doesn't emit. I think the best ton of emissions is the ton of emissions that you don't emit. So carbon capture would be at the bottom of the pyramid when it comes to activities that you want to implement. Carbon sequestration is a capacity thing. So we should be doing this anyways with our other strategies when it comes to natural heritage, but it will become more important when you realize a wetland that is there sequesters, 12 tons of emissions. And in 2045, when the cost of those emissions are very expensive, it'll become much more of a benefit to realize how effective those tools are at sequestering carbon when we have so much to do or so little left that we can get to because we've done so much already. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, lots to hope, I guess, with that technology in the future and the possibility of it being utilized here in Barrie and other municipalities. I understand some are using it to create hydrogen, I guess, and they store it. Is that part of the?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harris, I understand a bit about hydrogen. There's many technologies that are out there to generate hydrogen. Often in jurisdictions that have very clean electricity, hydrogen is a good source of essentially a gas that is compressed that you can use to fuel vehicle for transportation. In terms of carbon capture and those mechanisms related to hydrogen, I'm not too familiar with.
Yeah, me either. Thank you very much. This is a great report, and thank you for the presentation and for the questions. That answers the question. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor Natalie Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was great. A lot of information to go through as well with the reports. My question is similar to Councillor Thompson's. If you had advice for anyone watching at home, what would you say is your #1 recommendation that they could do at home to improve energy efficiency? Something that would be simple that they could work towards. Do you have anything off the top of your head? It doesn't matter who answers.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harris. The #1 thing people can do is if you don't have a thermostat in your house that's programmable, you go and buy one, and when you sleep or when you're not home, you turn it down. It's relatively affordable and it can have significant energy savings. When I first started at the city, that's what we did throughout our whole corporate operation. It can be up to 15% energy savings in some facilities.
That's great. Thank you. I guess I would like to ask the youth too, now that was such a great answer. Do you have another example that would be simple? Because that is super simple. Do you girls have any ideas of what the public watching could do to help with their home energy efficiency?
I don't know if Rosa, you wanted to start?
Sure. So I have seen a lot of initiatives with youth and general reuse and recycle initiatives that I think are very affordable and very sustainable, like thrifting wise, being able to reuse and actually promote that circular economy culture in youth and educating others on that. We can definitely reach a total implementation of that and hopefully become a lot more educated in reusing and recycling and actually reaching a lot more of a sustainable use of products.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, there's a lot of amazing ideas in different cities that are starting projects like Markham's Net Zero Community, etc. I'm talking to Ms. Banfield about those types of things. So it's really exciting to hope the future will be brighter with all of you in it. So thank you. It's a great, great report.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Any other questions for Mr. McMullen? Okay, I have a couple for you, Adam, and one for Lucy and Rosa. So one of the challenges always when we have big plans is the complexity of delivering them. I think of our community safety and well-being plan, hugely important, huge number of partners, 14 action items. I pulled off the matrix sheet, the all-important who does what, all on one page. And on one level, it seems like an enormous challenge because it's a big grid. It's got 19 action items and 36 partners. That's a lot of coordination. On the other hand, it shows the enormous breadth and depth of this plan. But I guess what I wanted to ask you directly, Adam, is you said in your presentation, each of those big moves, you'll come forward to council and say, okay, here's how we're doing these. Are you envisioning those as individual steps over the coming months and years? So council would approve each chunk of these, or with the approval tonight, is the intention to come back and get a quick start? I know there's a couple of quick start items, but I guess with all of these different pieces, because it's such a big and rightly ambitious plan, for it to succeed, it's going to require a lot of solid resourcing, including probably more than one person. I can't imagine one climate change coordinator and yourself managing 36 partners and 19 action items. So just maybe say a bit more about how we make sure this plan happens.
Thank you for the question. So I guess what I was trying to be clear about the bucketing idea. So actions that are identified as lead, as the city is the lead, we will bring forward. And there's a number of those actions. But then there's those other actions that aren't the natural lead, or that's not the service that the city provides. And the conservation authorities, for example, could do a lot in certain areas. So they'll serve as the lead and we may partner with those. When I say we'll bring forward resourcing requests and budgeting needs, that will be for city-led actions that are specific. And I keep highlighting the two, but the deep energy retrofit and the green development standard, there's other ones, other activities in there. And there's other services that the city are doing that naturally align with this plan, and like public transit, active transportation, and those things. They come to council in by different means, but having the lens of climate action embedded with those decisions will help to address those items. But I agree there's a lot of actions, but to be clear, the ones that we are leading as a city will bring forward directly to council.
Okay, and that kind of anticipates my second question, which is around the deep energy efficiency retrofit program. I mean, it comes through when you read the full plan, as even in the staff report and the presentation, but especially as you read the full plan. 95% of emissions from transportation and buildings, headline initiatives in each, deep energy retrofit in buildings and EV adoption in transportation, many other things, of course, active transportation, transit, and there's no one piece to any of these. But just on that deep energy efficiency retrofit program, I noticed the lead is identified as a new energy retrofit entity, TBD. And the city is going to be the facilitator, and then there's a whole series of partners. And I did, by the way, want to compliment you on all of the partners that were engaged in this. I mean, just that alone is an incredible piece of work to go out and not just talk to industry, not just talk to the public sector, not just talk to advocates, bring them all together, as well as the community. But for this one, we're counting on a new retrofit entity. Can you tell a bit more about how we see that playing out? Because I really think this is a key one for the sort of next level of climate change mitigation.
Thanks for the question. So this is partly because we've implemented some action when it comes to this program. And what we envision is partnering with an entity that provides a concierge service. So essentially, there's a third party that we participate with that does kind of the vetting and assist in the application and processing the financing of a deep energy retrofit program. And we're looking to partner with entities and go and get FCM funding for that. So that's why we've identified a to be determined service, because we would be the lead in partnering with that concierge. And there's other municipalities that are looking to do this. And we're currently participating in a cohort with an FCM grant with the Clean Air Partnership to do the studies and necessary steps to then make the next step to then participate. It makes a lot of sense for a lot of municipalities to participate in a service that does this across the province, because it reduces overhead, it improves efficiencies and all those types of things. So that's why there's a to be determined there, because we're looking at that direction and that seems to make sense. It's really challenging for us to take that in-house when you have the opportunity to scale it up across multiple cities in the province.
Absolutely. And of course, this is some work we are doing together through the MARS initiative for Municipal Energy Efficiency Fund, which also has FCM support now. And I think that's a key piece because as we all know, there's a strategy here. It will also require resourcing, which means money and people. And yet we've seen, for example, in London, England, the mayor of London, England had a fund which got leveraged 10-1 with private sector and philanthropic investment to leverage the government money, which then funded those energy retrofits out of the kind of savings that they generate. So it's its own business case, but then the carbon impact, the reduction in carbon, especially through energy retrofits, was so much greater. If we're counting on the next entity to do that, and I know FCM's been looking at who can play that concierge service. AMO has local authority services that did our streetlights, for example. That's sort of low hanging fruit because it's one thing. You're just doing streetlights. Deep energy retrofit is much larger, especially on the community scale. So would you see reporting back? I mean, do you think that's the kind of thing that's going to happen in the next sort of year or so, or is that something that, yeah?
Yes, it's an immediate action. We're focused on it, and we're actually talking internally about how this would work. So that cohort is going through the characterization studies, and then they're going to come back with a plan about what that concierge service would look like. So I would hope within the year we report back on where that is. Yeah,
There's a lot of depth to that one, I think. Okay, and then my question for Lucy and Rosa, and thank you again for being part of this presentation. And there's totally no wrong answer here. I'm interested if there's something that didn't get into the plan that you were hoping to see. And I mean, this is a hugely ambitious plan. So I'm trying to imagine what that would be. But I know when you did imagine Barrie, you had a very forward-looking kind of thought about what our community could be like in the longer term. And not all of those things might have fit in this plan. So I'm interested if there's something else that didn't get in there that you would like to see and you would like us to keep our eye on or keep focusing on. Rosa?
Passing the baton to Lucy, please.
Sure. I think something that I would have liked to see a little more emphasis on, potentially not necessarily in the plan itself, but just in general in how the city goes forward with enacting this plan and with how they're dealing with the climate crisis, is really heavy emphasis on the people in our community who are ultimately the most affected, which, that includes Indigenous communities, that includes houseless people and people living in poverty, disabled people. I think just going forward that we should really have a heavy look into programs that will support those folks in dealing with the impacts of climate change that we're already seeing, and making sure that as we go forward with dealing with it, it's done in a way that is accessible for everyone. So I think, yeah, that would probably be my answer. I don't know, Rosa, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, and I also agree with the recent hurricane this summer. You can see how extreme weather has definitely taken over our local city as well, not just only impacting like internationally, like for example, in countries like Haiti, who's also hit by climate crises. We can also look at like our local cities, like previous tragedies and such, and contributed to climate crisis as well. And we definitely need to recognize how many people were able to recover and many people were not able to recover from the damages.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to leave the questions there. That's a great note to leave on. As with many of the other challenges affecting our community, like the housing crisis, we know it is not felt by everyone equally. And a reminder of that is a really great message to give us. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for the presentation and for answering questions. Lucy and Rosa and Mr. McMullen, of course, an enormous amount of work here. Members of General Committee, Deputy Mayor Ward, you held the item. If you wouldn't mind putting it on the floor, then we can move into discussion and debate.
I will put it on the floor and I'll make a few comments too.
All right, go ahead.
The only thing I wanted to mention was something that really wasn't mentioned by anybody, and that was the quality of the report, the writing of the report. I found it very readable, which was, I mean, often to be truthful, when we get a General Committee agenda and we see a 90-page report in there, whatever it is, 80-page, sometimes think, oh no, what's this going to be like? But it was actually very well written. It was easy to understand. I love the examples that were used in it. You didn't just use big cities like Ottawa and Toronto, you used, comparable cities like Kingston and Guelph and Newmarket, and even smaller places like Sault Ste. Marie. And I think it was really valuable to see kind of things that municipalities are actually doing to meet their climate targets. So I just want to say thanks for the extremely well-written report. And I think that's important because one of the big things in this report is getting the public of Barrie to buy into the report. And I think you have to have a report that they can actually read or want to read to make that successful. So congratulations.
Thanks for that, Deputy Mayor Ward. You're absolutely right. I thought the same thing. Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. And I would echo that. I thought the report was very well written and very useful. And we have, I think it's really important to have a plan because if you don't have a plan, you don't know where you're going, and you really do need, and we need a plan. And I'm glad the motion is on the floor, and I have an amendment, or it's not really an amendment, it's more of an addition. And just by way of background, I thought Councillor Natalie Harris asked a really great question. What could people at home do? And one of the things that you can do is when your lawnmower quits, your gas-powered lawnmower quits, buy an electric one. And buying an electric lawnmower will reduce your carbon output by 20 times. Running a leaf blower for an hour is like driving a car 1,700 kilometers. So these kind of things are very impactful, and at the same time, not that hard to do for the average homeowner. And I feel like we need to encourage our homeowners to do those kind of things. I would love to have our builders, when they give in a new house, a fridge and a stove and a washer and a dryer, why not an electric lawnmower? My amendment is to add these words, that we're going to add a second paragraph to it, that staff be directed to investigate ways to eliminate the use of gas-powered lawn and garden equipment in the city's own operations and throughout the city generally, and report back to General Committee at the end of the second quarter in 2022. We can't ask our people, the people that live in Barrie, to make a sacrifice if the city of Barrie isn't going to do that. So I think we need to look at our own shop and say, what changes could we make to our lawn and garden operation that would reduce the noise and the pollution and the carbon emissions. And then also this motion suggests that we also look at ways that our community can do that, the general public, so that, and maybe there are ways we should incentivize it. I don't know, there's probably a lot of creative ways, but I do think that our youth council representatives said it really well. They said, what we need is some concrete action. And there it is. Maybe that's one little piece that we can do tonight to get this moving along. So, Mr. Mayor, that's my amendment.
Okay, we have an amendment on the floor to add a paragraph 2. That staff be directed to investigate ways to eliminate the use of gas-powered lawn and garden equipment in the city's own operations and throughout the city generally, and report back to General Committee at the end of the second quarter of 2022 on the amendment. Councillor Natalie Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Yes, I'm 100%. And I thought we were already doing this. Am I?
I was actually going to ask this too. We did have an item for discussion on this, but I am not clear as to what the outcome of it was. It was several years ago. I'm looking at Mr. Gross, Ms. McAlpine. Madam Clerk, any information you can give us?
If not, then yay, Claire.
To tell you the truth, I cannot recall whether the item went ahead.
Mr. McMullen, did staff look at that piece as part of the plan?
That's on my my branch doesn't manage parks operations. I believe that's where this would sit. So I recall hearing about that, but I don't know where it stands either.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Nally Harris. I don't particularly recall that item. So what I can do is I will look up and research, and I'll get an email to members of council.
Great. Yes, thank you. So in the meantime, I approve that amendment. That's great. Yeah.
Never hurts to say it twice. Maybe we can get an update though on the status of that previous item. I don't recall myself what the disposition of it was, but I do remember that an item was brought forward. On the amendment, members of General Committee? No, I will call the question then. Those in favor of the amendment? Is anyone opposed? None. That carries unanimously. Thanks. Councilor Rima, did you have anything further on the broader plan?
I think that's fine. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. Other comments on the main motion as amended? Councillor Aylwin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. So I'm going to start with a quote here. The world's biggest polluters are guilty of arson of our only home. So that was Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, after the release of the latest IPCC report on climate change. And I think that was a recognition that individual action, done by homeowners in isolation, one-offs, is not enough. This is a collective problem, and it needs collective action to address it. And I think that's what this plan recognizes. This plan doesn't just look at the corporation of the city of Barrie's emissions. This plan is looking at the entire city's emissions. It's not just looking at one sector of the economy, it's looking at all sectors of the economy. And that's the type of action that we need if we're going to address this problem. But I do want to stress, and I'm so thankful for the work that the stakeholder advisory group, the consultants, Adam's team, and other city staff members have put into this. This is just the starting point. We have hired a climate change coordinator, which is great, but these ambitious actions are going to require real resources, substantial resources, but it's an investment in our future with economic payoff, as we've seen. But I think the most important thing is that this is what the science requires of us to avoid catastrophic climate change. And we have to do everything we can to avoid it. And frankly, we aren't doing enough. We still aren't doing enough. Even if we pass this today, we aren't doing enough. Even if we complete all the actions in this plan, we aren't doing enough, as we saw on the graph, the red line that didn't quite get us to those blue dots. So we have a lot more to do. And I hope we can all collectively work towards it. Yes, let's do those little changes that we can at our own homes and in our own lives. Absolutely. But we need governmental action, and we need to hold the corporations and the polluters who have been burning down our only home accountable for their actions. That's the big picture. And that's what I love about this plan, is that it's looking at that big picture. But again, a lot more work to do. So thank you. I will be voting in favor of the report, and I look forward to the next concrete actions moving forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Aylwin. Other comments? Any? Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I guess a comment to staff. When I look at the endorsement of the plan, I think it's wonderful. But when I think about the call to action, I wanted to pay attention to the note that adjoined the documentation tonight, and it was by Wilf, who is the president of the Electric Vehicle Society of Canada. And we're quite fortunate to have Wilf as an active member across the board, but also he sits on the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee. Through Wilf, and as well as a representative from the Aurelia EV Society and Living Green, They did a local event tied to the theme of treading lightly, which was to have EV vehicles available for trial and testing and getting individuals ready for kind of that moving from a pre-contemplation. Is it worth the investment? How do I charge this thing? How long is it going to last? What are the myth busting pieces about battery life? And what do I need to do to retrofit my home to make sure it's reliable in a Canadian winter, right? Those are the things I hear at a local level, and I'm even asking about. So I guess my comment is I would love to see the city, and I'm not sure if staff want to comment to this or if Adam, you have any ideas. When we have these engagement initiatives, how do we make this focus kind of an always event? Where do we always have an opportunity to try an EV vehicle when we have a city event? How do we purposefully include residents in conversations and almost showcase how youth are even leading the way in some of these adoptions, or how easy it is to retrofit? So my one comment is I'm not sure if staff can give me direction on where to action it, or if it's just a takeaway. As we come to the end of this term, where does this type of focus become a priority in the following 4 years with committees? So, is there something more formalized in that active transportation and sustainability mandate for the committee to look at? Do we as a city communicate being deliberate about how we are engaging residents in getting ready for this adoption and this movement? I think it would be really great to see us putting resources and commitments into those types of events and kind of bolstering Living Green and the EV Society that might be doing this on the best interests of residents. And my other thought coming up is, we're doing a bike the night. So we talk a lot about giving up the car, and that's a great thing to consider from a gas powered, diesel powered. But what about the wheeling and walking? So let's also communicate the opportunities around those other pieces with respects to how do I rack a bike on a bus? How do I use public transit? And staff are doing amazing work, but sometimes I find if you're not at the table, you're not having the conversation. And so I would love to see some type of integrated approach, whether that's through your work, Adam, or if it's just a global consideration about how we go forward with resident engagement and with mandates for our committees that really push some of this stuff forward and are aligned.
Through Mayor Lehman to Councillor Kungle. Many points there. I guess one thing I want to highlight is Wilf was a member of the stakeholder advisory group, and in the EV adoption portion, it is very well scripted about the activities we need to undertake to myth bust, to gain understanding about these considerations for EV ownership. I think another point is one of the enabling or immediate actions is developing a communication and engagement program around this, but also the idea that there's other services in the city doing things that we can simply incorporate these considerations for. So we've identified that working group as a mechanism. So we sit at the table, public transit is doing something, active transportation is doing something, I'm doing something, and then we have a commonality there. So the plan does outline those mechanisms, but I do feel your point. There's so many times that it'd be simple to add those things in easily in order to kind of get that message across, especially when you do ride the night or whatever it may be. And I actually participate in one of those trials with an EV where I live in Aurelia, and I got an idea of how they drive. They're really quick. So it's a very good opportunity for other residents to do the same thing.
Thank you. So very supportive of the plan and look forward to hearing any ways in which the work you do can be incorporated in our support to actioning resident events and activities.
Thanks very much, Councillor Kungle. I have Councillor Morales next.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Mr. McMullen, does the report as amended, does it have a stipulation that yourself / your department, Mr. Hughes, report back to council for regular updates as we go into the future?
Through Mayor Lehman to Councilor Morales, we do identify, I think, a 5-year regular reporting and update. And one of the first actions in the plan is a monitoring and reporting framework. So we've identified that as an idea, but I think I would like to line the carbon budgeting activity with a regular reporting. So yes, we are going to look at that. We do have something outlined in the plan, but we could change that because one of the first activities is how do we want to monitor and report the success on this? So that we could modify that to be a different time frame than the typical kind of 5-year strategy that we see in municipality.
Okay, perfect. I'm just gonna put a quick amendment on the floor that the manager of energy or designate provide a yearly update to council in the form of presentation of this plan. To update progress to date. I can speak to that, Mayor Lehman.
Sure. Just before you do, Mr. McMullen, just remind us again what the planned reporting is to council.
In the implementation portion of the plan, we identify a 5-year timeframe. Every 5 years, we would report, we would have a refresh of the plan. I would intend to report regularly on the outcomes of that more frequently, but a full refresh of the plan is planned for 5 years.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the review. So what is the reporting though? Like how frequently and in what form would council get updates about our progress?
Well, I report annually on the energy management activities for the corporation. As part of that regular memo, I would include this kind of reporting in that for sure. It's not explicitly outlined in the plan implementation, but I would think an annual included in my energy memo would be an appropriate location for that.
Okay, but to be fair, Council Morales, I think is asking for it to be presented to council. That wouldn't be unless we directed you to. So entirely appropriate to direct it. So the amendments on the floor, a new paragraph 3 to direct the manager to be presenting our progress annually to council. Councilor Morales, go ahead.
I'll keep it short because we have a lot of things in the agenda. Pretty self-explicit. I think one of the things about setting goals is keeping ourselves accountable. Staff work hard, but it's always nice for the council to have an idea on what's working, what's not, and how we can pivot.
Thanks, Councilor Morales. Anyone want to speak to that amendment? Okay, if not, I'll call the question. Those in favor of it? Is anyone opposed? None? We'll see you once a year, Adam. Well, I might not. Okay. Others who wish to speak to the motion now as amended twice. Okay, I will just say thank you again. I will say it is a very ambitious plan. And I guess the one little asterisk I want to put on today is when you have a plan that requires fundamental change to our buildings, to our transportation, these are expensive things. And local government has never been the level of government that's been able to fund the kinds of capital that is required to meaningfully affect climate change. I mean, we have barely enough money to do the 60 different things that we deliver the residents of Barrie every day. Absolutely, we need to change and use a lens on all of those 60 things about climate change. But I want to echo some of the earlier comments and the comments in the report that we need senior levels of government to come to the table. And I do not want us to think for a moment, oh, just because we don't have deep pockets, we can't lead on these things. So the reason I brought up earlier in my questions, the MEEF, the Municipal Energy Efficiency Fund that Mars is trying to put together with Victoria, we're part of that as well, the City of Barrie, City of Victoria and others, is because we know the money's got to come. We're going to need more money to do these things, but there is a very clear return on all that investment to our local economy, as has been outlined in here, and far more importantly, to trying to hand the next generation a livable world. And I think that funding is going to be absolutely essential to the difference between the plan being a good plan and the plan being one that has a substantial outcome to our carbon footprint. And so I guess I really want to encourage, as we adopt this, us to advocate for the funding of this plan. We are going to make choices in the way we do things around the City of Barrie. In our budgets every year, we make choices around whether we invest in transit or not, whether we invest in active transportation routes, bike routes, energy efficiency projects. We've seen more and more of them in our budget because of the work Mr. McMullen has been doing for years for us that have improved our own carbon footprint, but we were just getting started. But that's what we do. To hit the community-wide scale is going to require a lot more people, a lot more partners, and a lot more dollars. And it's capital funding that's needed because changing heating systems and buying new kinds of vehicles are not cheap propositions. But the really hopeful note I wanted to put on this is I've watched other cities do it. There are other cities, not just around the world. There are other cities in Canada that are ahead of us on this, on a community energy level and on the corporate level. And so the funding is out there. We know that the FCM and the federal government have provided a substantial amount of funding. Even they would tell you, we want to be the seed funding to leverage additional dollars. And there are so many new organizations and entities out there that do want to fund these kinds of initiatives, whether it is philanthropic or corporate social responsibility or otherwise. We need to get that funding to Barrie. And again, referencing the housing issue that we had earlier, because it affects people differently, it is most urgent for those who are least able to afford the changes. But I do believe this is an incredibly ambitious plan, one that is we can be incredibly proud of, because there's so much work in here and so many different stakeholders that have been consulted. Its success will depend on us getting it resourced. And by us, that's going to be the responsibility and part of City Council, substantially a part of City Council. It can't just be, well, we're going to expect staff to go off and apply for grants, and then whatever part of the plan gets grants, that's what gets done. It's going to have to be, hey province, hey feds, all of us together, hey industry, we're going to need a substantial commitment to this at a community-wide level. And I believe that's worth doing because that's what the next generation is telling us. And even if not, we know that there are 100 reasons why we should be implementing the plan. So I thank you so much for the work, and to all the partners watching tonight and participating tonight. Thank you for your work. I'll call the question on the motion as amended. Those in favor? Is anyone opposed? None. That carries. Okay, thank you again. We will go back to the one item that was, and thank you again, Rosa and Lucy, for being here with us tonight for this. We will go back to the one previous item that was the waterfront parking permit update that came out of Finance and Corporate Services Committee. Deputy Mayor Ward, you held that item as well. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I want to put it on the floor, and I'll introduce an amendment that says that the motion be amended by deleting that somebody else has an amendment, that the motion be amended by adding the following paragraph, that staff in the Traffic and Parking Services Department investigate ways to prevent long-term parking by nearby residents in waterfront lots and streets. Report back to Finance and Corporate Services Committee, and I'll speak to that.
Okay, go ahead.
And my apologies for not bringing this up at the Finance Committee, but it didn't occur to me till after. But I know I foresee a problem with our waterfront parking and that there's no limits on it. And I can see as we get, especially as we see a lot of the development taking place around the waterfront, a lot of the residential development and a hotel development, that people will start using that to park their cars. And that's not what waterfront parking is intended to be. It's intended to be for people from Barrie who want to go down there and enjoy it for the day, maybe people from downtown who want to enjoy it. It's not just our downtown either. I think this could be a problem on Johnson's Beach, for example. I can see people using that to their advantage. You know, people that may be living in some of the new apartments parking on Johnson's Beach. So I just want staff to look at it. It's not a simple matter of just banning parking overnight, because I think there are legitimate reasons, for example, the marina, why people are parking there overnight. So I think staff has to come back to us with some kind of plan to how we can eliminate people from using that as their parking spaces. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Deputy Mayor Ward. On the amendment, Councilor McCann.
Sure, thanks to Mayor Lehman and to Deputy Mayor Ward. Are you looking to eliminate, or are you looking to add another fee for overnight parking?
I'm not ruling out anything. I guess that staff is going to get back to us to see what it would be. But it was for Barrie residents. They're not paying any fee now. And if somebody in a Barrie resident would be able to park overnight, if they were living in a place nearby, park in those lots for free overnight. That's what I'm trying to eliminate.
So I thought your direction though was to eliminate overnight parking. Was that clear on that?
No, I just said I don't think we can just eliminate overnight parking because there's people, legitimate users of the marina, that need it overnight.
Yeah, I noticed the amendment is to prevent long-term parking. Is the specific word? Yeah, okay. On the amendment, Councillor Jim Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Through you to Councillor Ward, it made me think about your amendment about the potential of having unlimited passes and actually making that even more of a possibility. Because I think one of the recommendations is no limit to the number of permits that can be issued per physical address. So to your point, it made me think about that could be impacted. So I would support your amendment, and it made me think about that as well.
Yeah, we had a quick discussion about that this morning. Ms. James Reed, go ahead.
Thank you for the question through you to Councillor Harris. The intent of the program is to not limit the number of passes that the city's issuing, but that the household has to be associated with the vehicle registration. So that we think will inherently limit the number because you have to have your vehicle registered to that household.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for that. On the amendment, any further comments? No? I'll call the question on the amendment. Those in favor? Anybody opposed? None. That carries. Well, it's nice not to have to look around a Zoom screen for hands that are up. Yeah, see, looking for your card. Yeah. I think we have another amendment coming on this one. Councillor Reitman, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also have an amendment. Item number 4, essentially my amendment drops item number 4. And the reason for doing that is item number 4 says that the city approach Service Ontario and or its 2 members of provincial parliament offices regarding partnering with Service Ontario to issue the city waterfront hang tag when residents renew their plates. And since that time, the province no longer renews plates. So it's kind of a useless item here that, you know, we could send a letter to these people, but they'll just send a letter back saying, oh, we're not renewing plates anymore. So all I'm doing is just removing that, that one provision in the original motion.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Reitman. On the amendment to delete paragraph 4, Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Through you to council. I was the one, I believe, that put this amendment in at Finance Committee. It's not useless. So while we might not be renewing stickers, there are still people that are going to be purchasing license plates, fixing license plates that were damaged, especially those legacy ones, a couple of years, like they're horrible. Getting driver's license in general. Some of them may even be updating driver's licenses in person or for other reasons. So the purpose of this, it's that efficiency of point of contact. You already have somebody there for a reason. You can kind of go through reasons and get them to come in less and take care of this. Now, if they say no, thank you, then so be it. But I think it's more than just sending a letter. It's having an actual conversation. That's what our MPPs are for. You know, they're working hard for us and trying to find some efficiencies. And I know Service Ontario has been innovative with different approaches. So unless staff think that this is a time prohibit initiative, it's due diligence to see how we can find another way to have our residents get our services.
Okay, Councillor Morales, any others on the amendment? Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, just a question for staff. Like, I mean, this refers to the waterfront hang tag, whereas I thought the whole purpose of going electronic was to eliminate the hang tags. So I'm just wondering what the value or purpose in this motion is now that given it more thought since our committee.
Ms. James Reed.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey, for the question. We as staff feel that this maybe is a little redundant, given that there has been a change to the sticker, and the motion does say when residents renew their plates. So we didn't understand what Councillor Morales was indicating in terms of a new, the issuance of new plates. I'm also of the opinion that Service Ontario will want to implement a system for all the municipalities that they serve within Ontario, and they probably won't be that interested in a specific program just for Barrie. And because we are moving forward with an electronic system through Hotspot, I think the most we could probably do is ask Service Ontario to include like a rack card or something at their location for information. But my understanding from looking at the Service Ontario new model for the plate renewal, they're encouraging residents to do that online, and there wouldn't be an in-person visit in most cases. So we do feel that it might not be necessary at this point.
Great, thank you. Yeah, because like even when you look at people's licenses being renewed or OHIP cards, typically it's about a 5-year renewal period. So I don't think it's really going to hit the target audience that we want at the rate that you want. And obviously, I would imagine, especially if they're going to be issuing something through Service Ontario, they're going to, I would suspect, charge some type of an admin fee, opposed to, I do like your idea about using it as an advertising venue with some type of a literature that would be available to residents just for information purposes, but still push everybody back to city staff to be able to go get that or do it online through the app. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harvey. Anybody else in the amendment? We'll move to the question. Okay, so the amendment is to delete that paragraph, paragraph 4. Those in favor of that amendment to delete paragraph 4. Opposed? 1. The amendment carries. Anything else on the motion as amended? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor of the motion as amended. Anybody opposed? None. That carries. Okay, we will now move back into the staff reports. Next staff report that was held was with regards to the needle collection kiosks and public access naloxone kits, the pilot programs update. Councillor Natalie Harris, you held this.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I'll put that on the floor, and my amendment would be to delete paragraph 2 and replace with the following: that staff be directed to investigate other needle kiosk designs, which would only allow needles to be added, and report back to general committee. And I can speak to that.
Okay, so the items on the floor, and then there's an amendment been moved to delete paragraph 2 and replace it with direction to investigate other designs which would only allow needles to be added. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, through you. So there are different, I've looked at online just quickly, there are different types of needle kiosks that would prevent just garbage collection from going into them. And then if we are able to find something, financially feasible, we can make sure that there are garbage disposals right near that as well. So it's easy for people that are looking for a garbage disposal to not try to even put it into the kiosk. So I think it's worth just investigating. I know that there is success with the CMHA and the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit kiosks, so they are successful. I think just the design might have been an issue, and it was too easy for people to open it and put garbage in. And I agree that I looked also into other cities, and that is a problem throughout a lot of different cities because of the size of the opening of that type of kiosk.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Harris. On the amendment, Councillor McCann.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. This question probably will go to, I think, Ms. McAlpine. If you did investigate and you found a better system that Councillor Harris is looking for, would it be the same company dismantling this process and installing a new one? Or could we get rid of this process and investigate and come back so we're not slowing the process down?
Mayor Lehman, through you to Councillor McCann. Certainly we'll look at that opportunity. I believe the same contractor is used by the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit with their bins as the one that the city's using. We did issue a request for proposals for the ones that were installed, but we will certainly look at what options are available.
Sorry, I don't think maybe Mike, let me ask the question a different way, Ms. McAlpine. If we decide that we want to change the system, would the people that are installing the new system of needle distribution or garbage, would they be the same people that would be taking out the system that we have right now? I guess what I'm asking for, is there efficiencies in waiting on dismantling the needle program and waiting for you to investigate? Or can we go right now and dismantle the needle program and then come back with a report? Would it be two different companies?
Mayor Lehman, through you to Councillor McCann, the existing company was retained through a proposal process that was for a pilot, so they are responsible for removing. Therefore, I would have them complete that work before you would implement a new program.
So I'm just wondering, maybe we can keep number 2 in, Councillor, and then add yours as a third, so therefore we're not slowing down the production, and we could get rid of the the unsafe ones right now. And if you do find a new program, the city staff do find a new program that's better, then we can implement that later on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lehman. Yeah, I do see what you're saying. I agree. I guess to be clear, the type of kiosk right now does need to be discontinued. It isn't working efficiently. If that makes better clerical sense, sure, we'll keep that in and then add the third. That would be, let's try again.
Yeah. So you need to put as a third paragraph, right?
Yeah. Is that Miss Cook?
Or sorry,
Yeah,
do
I
you?
actually don't think that's in order, but
Okay.
Ms. McAlpine, go ahead.
Mayor Lehman, thank you. And to the members of council, the existing pilot program ends in April. So the bins will be removed no matter what. So I don't think it's necessary to have anything else. We'll have to investigate the other options and pricing and then report back on that, as there are no funds included in the budget to continue the program.
Okay, perfect. So then, no, Councillor McCann, we'll just let that flow through and then start maybe looking for a new kind.
Anyone else on the amendment? Councillor Kungle?
Thank you. May I ask for a point of clarification? Because I'm not sure where we just landed in that comment, because if the amendment stands, it does say to remove paragraph 2. I'm in support of keeping paragraph 2 into the original motion. As noted, unless I'm misunderstanding it, that it does end in April. The analytics have showed issue with it. There is no budget to continue past. So I would almost see that the investigation is a separate and third directive, that while the pilot discontinue, we would like staff to explore other options and come back with a budget should another type of kiosk be available. That's so I wanted to clarify that, because I wasn't sure if that's where we landed or if you were still deleting paragraph 2, sentence 2.
Yeah, we are still deleting it. So just to be clear, Ms. McAlpine, did you require council direction to discontinue the pilot program?
We would require council direction to continue
Right.
it.
So
It
because of
automatically
paragraph
is.
2 as it exists, it's actually unnecessary.
Okay.
So I think we're fine. I think the amendment's in order as it is. What we're doing is changing the direction to staff to investigate a new one, but the old program's not going to continue.
No, thank you for the clarification, just because the amendment noted it would be deleting the reference to it ending. So thank you.
Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Mayor Lehman. I'll be very quick. Through you to maybe Chief Mainprice. In the report, it said pictures and stuff, and you were saying about the vandalism and not being able to weigh the amount and stuff. While we're looking at other options or vendor, would there still be a record of if discarded needles are in the vicinity of where the bins were as part of it, to see if the locations of them are working? And, you know, like if now the bins removed in April, we see, you know, a lot of needles showing up, then we know that location was probably suited. But would that be part of, or could it be part of when we're looking for another vendor? If you can maybe just keep council informed if there are still needles being found once the bins are removed, I guess is what I'm saying.
Through Mayor Lehman to Councillor Thompson. Yeah, we generally have been relying on our park staff. They're our best eyes and ears to let us know where they're seeing the discarded needles, as well as some of the complaints we received from residents. We have the park staff have reported they've seen a shift in some of the areas already where needles were being found, and now they're being found in some other areas. So we would certainly monitor where the park staff are reporting needles to be found and include that with any future procurement.
Thanks. Perfect.
That's a good point, Councillor Thompson. Thanks for that. Any other comments on the amendment? Councillor Jim Harris.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lehman. Maybe through you to Ms. McAlpine. You're asked to do a pilot, and this may be the fault of council, but I asked the question, by what measure would you determine this would have been a success or a failure? I mean, that's the question I have.
Mayor Lehman, through you to Councillor Jim Harris, there are a number of measures that we would have considered it being a success. If there was a significant reduction in the number of discarded needles that were in areas where the public or staff could be impacted by them, significant volumes of needles without the contamination or the cross contamination. Those were both items. And then certainly if we had included the option within the contract to be able to move the containers to another location if one location wasn't successful and another area had started to see more distribution, but those were all included. And then the amount of damage or number of times that the containers needed to be replaced due to damage were all factors that we were considering.
Yeah, thank you. May I follow up, Mayor Lehman? Thanks, Mr. McAlpine. So with that noted, and I have read the report, so I asked the question, was so the solution of a container that can't have garbage put in it, how much of the measures does this improve? And would you see that being, obviously other measures, continue to be at risk? There's no change possibly to vandalizing, other discarding needles in the flower beds and those kind of things.
Through Mayor Lehman to Councillor Jim Harris, I think it would impact one of the factors that would be used in determining the success, and it would also be easier to determine the actual number of needles that were removed. With the contamination level so high in the bins that we were seeing, it was very difficult. Certainly by weight, you couldn't determine how many needles were being moved off of potentially public property into or grounds into an actual container. So that would assist in determining success, but it's certainly not the only factor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Anyone else on the amendment? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor of amendment? Is anyone opposed? None. That carries unanimously on the main motion as amended. Any further comments? I was just going to say, oh, sorry, Councillor Aylwin. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Two quick comments. The first is on the publicly accessible naloxone kit part of this program. I just wanted to recognize that in paragraph 24 of the report, it's noted that these kits being installed in city facilities resulted in the reversal of 2 opioid-related overdoses. That is a big deal, and it's a good reminder that the things we do here have a real impact on people's lives. And I just want to say a big thank you to staff for the work they have done on this life-saving program. And my second comment does focus in on the needle collection piece and the issue of discarded needles. We know that there is a solution available to this problem of discarded needles, and that's a supervised consumption site. This council endorsed it May 31st of last year, and the application was formally submitted to both the federal and provincial governments in October of 2021. People are dying at an alarming rate, and we have seen both the federal and provincial governments dragging their feet on this life-saving service during an emergency. So it's a way to save lives, it's a way to reduce discarded needles, and I just hope that both those levels of government will take action immediately, because we desperately need that service.
Thanks, Councillor Owen. Anyone else on the main motion as amended? Go ahead, Councillor Natalie Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. That was a great point. Thank you, Councillor Aylwin. I think maybe it's a good idea to share with you a quick correspondence that I did receive from Dr. Simon yesterday with respect to the progress of the SCS. And again, they are working towards making a report within the next couple of months. But something that I did find quite interesting was that they mentioned in the interim over the past several months, they've explored the potential for a local agency to apply for an urgent public health needs site, and that continues to be considered. So that's just maybe good for the public to know as well. There's a long delay, but the conversation is still happening. Yeah.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Harris. On the motion as amended. Okay, Councillor Aylwin actually said what I was going to say, which is similar to the AEDs that we have in our facilities, which have saved lives. These have now saved lives, and the more we can get them out and get the training out, the more we have the potential to save a life. So thank you for the work on the pilot program, and I'm glad to see it continuing and growing. Call the question. Those in favor of the motion as amended. Anybody opposed? None. That carries. Okay, that completes the staff reports. Now, we had seven items for discussion placed by members of council tonight, and 6 of them were held. So I'm just going to encourage all the members of council who held the items and or want to speak to them, just to obviously make your comments and ask questions, but if you can move to your amendments as soon as possible, that would be helpful so that we can get through all 6 of these. The first one is with regards to establishing a youth council. It was put on by Councillor Jim Harris, was held by Councillor Mike McCann.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and I will be brief because I actually do think this is going to have quite a big impact in next year's council. And I just wanted a little more information on what Councillor Harris's was vision. And, I think investing in our youth is one of our top investments as councillors, and it's building a city. And I just wanted to hear more. I wanted to get the community excited about this.
Thank you, Councilor McCann. I was wondering if it would be held and thinking how would I be able to thank people if it didn't get held, but thank you for your interest.
Perfect, that's all I was looking for.
Oh, sorry.
And we'll just assume that's on the floor as printed, eh?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Harris.
So thank you, Councilor McCann. This has a bit of a history. Something interests me. I work in youth services, so it's something we do at Newpath. But I was approached by Ward 8 resident Will Yang, an absolutely brilliant and thoughtful young fellow, and we had the pleasure of meeting with Will, Mayor Lehman and I. And it's something that he was passionate about. So actually, the 3 of us all were something we'd all thought about and wanted to put to action. And again, recognizing some of the things that we've done over the course of our council, and even most recently for me with the theater task group, thinking about it being a future investment, something that I'll enjoy, but really it's more enjoyable for my children's generation. And for many, many years, the theater will be there. And we did get some feedback from youth, but we didn't intentionally do a youth survey. And it's one of my regrets, not doing a youth survey, what they'd think and want from a performing arts center. So then even recently with some of the comments we were discussing last council, and it was like, wow, what would youth say about that? So it just reinforced the importance of this, and the mechanism really to get this done is actually, you can't direct the next council, but in speaking with Ms. Cook, who's very helpful to try to put together the framework for a committee that could then be added to the next committee, council committee distribution. So, and again, really to have youth involved. So again, I thank Will, and I also had the presentation at Innisdale Secondary School with Mr. Jamie Babcock's class and their global studies class, and shared the most with them before March break. So again, lots of excitement from youth, and tonight, recognizing with the youth from the environment work, how brilliant, how committed they are. And I just thought, we often get people and with good feedback. I've lived in Barrie for 50 years. Well, I plan to live in Barrie for 50 more years is what these people will say. And so we want to get that voice. So, as part of that, I talked about honoring the present, honoring the past, improving the present, and protecting the future. So I think they're our future, and that was my motivation. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Harris. And I guess the only thing that I don't like about this plan is that I didn't think of it first. And so I just think that the opportunity that we can connect to our youth, and our youth, more importantly, can connect to us, and we can be inspired by our youth. And I guess the question I really have is this going to be something that's going to be in every single general committee report, or is it going to be a quarterly report? Because we've got all the issues that you've talked about here. They're in every single. They come up every 2 weeks. So have you gone that far down the rabbit hole, or is that something that you want back in the report?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councilor McCann, something that I would accept the guidance from the clerk. And I know there's municipalities who do this, we're not starting it from scratch. So again, trying to take what's best practice from other municipalities, but I would see it. I have experience, obviously, as a first-term councillor, but my experience with Heritage Barrie, for example, an incredibly committed group, lots of passion and experience, and we apply it where it fits, and they meet monthly. So I'd see it very similar. Even we have a seniors advisory, that kind of methodology where you'd have your monthly meetings, you'd build your agenda based on the items that were brought forward, and you might have something, or somebody else might have something. Hey, I'm going to ask the youth council to take this item and give it a look. So I think those are the kind of things that how that agenda would be generated would come from both inside the group and external from council, using the group as a tool to make better decisions.
Well, my last comment was that, we just held council, I think, supported this unanimously, I think 5 or 6 years ago with the I Love Barrie competition. And I actually had the great pleasure of telling one of the winners that she actually won. And just seeing her eyes light up and just being a part of society, being a part, connecting, being inspired and inspiring. Jim, I think this is great. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this impacts the city of Barrie. Thank you.
Any other comments on the motion? It's on the floor. Councillor Kungle.
Thank you. I have a couple of quick comments and maybe sharing some opportunities I see that I hope might be able to be incorporated as it comes back. One is knowing that we've got the student mayor process that we've rested. We also have a youth spirit catcher award, where in which do those processes get tabled with the youth committee? And how can we also look at, so seniors sometimes we're talking about, well, what about the all age friendly committees? So how do we actually promote the youth voice at different committees as well? So while this may be a direction for our youth committee, what about the possibility of thinking through the opportunities for those youth on that committee to actually be committed to some other tables and changing the conversation, adding to the conversation, and being a little bit more integrated into other committees as well?
Thanks for that, Councillor Kungle. Other comments on the motion? Councillor Jim Harris.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that. I think with good intentions, putting a single person on a committee that's focused on something else generally doesn't work well. So I think the strength of the youth being together on a committee allows them to have that comfort and confidence that they're with their peers, and they can then collectively respond to those committees that might need their voice. So although it feels like a good idea to put one person with one interest representing a larger interest, it doesn't generally represent well. So I thank you for the thought, but I wouldn't encourage that particular element. But the youth voice will get there, believe me. That's the goal.
Okay, any other comments on the motion? It's on the floor. Seeing none, those in favor, call the question. Nobody's opposed, that carries. Thanks for that. And thanks, Councillor Harris, and also thanks for introducing me to Will. He is an amazing guy. Lots of energy, and as we've seen tonight as well, lots of other youth leaders in our community. So I can imagine there could be a very strong youth council in the time to come. Next item that was held was put on by Councillor Natalie Harris. It's with regards to Ryan's Hope Breakfast to Go program. It was also held by Councillor McCann. Go ahead, Councillor McCann.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lehman. And I've given this quite a bit of thought. I know Ryan's Hope is a very tragic story, and it's felt by many of us. But I'm going to vote not in favor of your item discussion, and I'd like to kind of give you my in-depth answer. And I actually made some notes just so I want to get it right, because I am sensitive to this issue. I know, Nat, your heart is just gigantic, and you want to help, and you really want to help with this situation. But getting reports back from Don McAlpine, about the homeless situation here in Barrie, that it's increased by 50% during this council, right? That we really need to, I think, get laser focused on figuring out what our future is. And so I've got a couple questions, but I just wanted to start by letting you know that it doesn't go unappreciated by me and by our community. And I called you this week telling you that I ran into some people, and we're talking the world about you, and there was no real connection about me. It was just a spontaneous conversation. So you do have a lot of people that are watching in our community and that are really appreciative of what you're doing. Okay. So I guess I'm getting frustrated. This council talks a lot about the homeless situation here in Barrie, and there's a lot of moving parts. And I guess I'm gonna have a few questions tonight to figure out where all these moving parts are working together, how they're working together, and if they're working together. And I know that Simcoe County is one of our service providers, the Salvation Army, the Busby Center, Pathways, the Mayor's Office, Connected Core, and other services provided helping with the homeless. So I guess the question I have, either through Mayor Lehman himself or through Ms. Cook, our clerk, I believe that I'm going to probably mispronounce her last name, but Andrea Compabasco, she works in the mayor's office. She's your executive assistant, I believe. She works on Connected Core. And I just wanted to know, when's Andrea's report going to be come back from Connected Core, and are we working together as a group?
So, Councilor McCann, it's not on the item that's on the floor. The item that's on the floor is with regards to a breakfast program going into the gazebo at Heritage Park. I'm happy to answer your question. And the answer to that is council decided not to continue the principal secretary's contract. So it's up next week. She's leaving the city next week. But with regards to this item, the item that you've held and put on the floor, it's with regards to a breakfast program in the gazebo at Heritage Park. So that's what you need to talk about. Is there something related to that that you're interested in from Connected Core or otherwise?
Yeah, Mayor Lehman, I think I put it pretty clear here. I want to talk about the homeless situation, and I believe that Natalie Harris is, well, maybe I should take the opportunity to ask what Natalie Harris' motion really is. Who is it to feed?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Sorry, thank you, Mike. Through you, Mayor Lehman. It is to feed multiple unhoused. So Ryan's Hope usually in the summer feeds up to 130 or more individuals within an hour. In the winter time, it's anywhere from 20 to 50 people as well. A lot of familiar faces every week, but also changing all the time, if that answers that question.
If you don't mind my directness, Councilor Harris, it primarily is to feed the homeless, is it not?
Yeah, it's entirely to feed the homeless.
So it is entirely. So we are talking about the homeless then. Sorry, Jeff, did you know that?
Yes, Councilor McCann, I'm familiar with the Breakfast to Go program. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, so I'm talking about the homeless here, and you're asking me to get back on track. So I take a little offense to that. That's what I'm getting at.
So there's the motion that's on the floor is whether or not council will permit the use of the gazebo in Heritage Park for a charitable program that feeds the homeless. I understand you may want to talk about the broader issue of homelessness, but you got to talk to the item that's on the floor.
All right, I am going to refer this item of discussion until we receive a report from the mayor's office requesting a report from the city, the county of Simcoe, and to city council, and other programs available and services to support our homeless population. Significantly, I'm looking for what programs and services are provided and funded by the county of Simcoe.
Sorry, was that an amendment, Councilor McCann?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so just give members of general committee your amendment again, please?
Sure. I would like to refer this item of discussion until we receive the report from the mayor's office and request the report from the county of Simcoe to city council on the programs available and services to support our homeless population. Specifically, I'm looking for what programs and services are provided and funded by the county of Simcoe.
Okay, so go ahead, Mr. Press.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Through you to members of council. I believe there already is council direction for the county to come, I think in the fall, to do an update on their social services, a presentation, or is it earlier than the fall? Sorry, allowed or not? It's in the spring, sorry. But there already is council direction for the county to come and do a presentation on their social services, including, I'm sure, their work around homelessness.
Yeah, I guess the frustration I'm having, Mr. Prowse, is that we're here trying to vote on item discussion to allow feeding the homeless on our waterfront, and I don't think it's an appropriate location. But before I make that final decision, I'd like to get more information. So I guess I'm referring, maybe I need to refer this until we get the presentation from the county of Simcoe and from the mayor's office. I'm sure if Andrea is leaving, there's still going to be a report and presentation from those findings and what we're doing. And I'd like to gather all the information. And I guess my earlier comments were, I just find that there's a lot of different lanes when we're trying to address the homeless situation, and it's not working because we're having more homeless. And so I am trying to help by getting more information. So that was where my direction was going, Mayor Lehman. I'm not sure how you thought I was off track, but I don't know how to be any clearer than that.
Councilor McCann, that's not appreciated, okay? If you want more
Agreed.
information on programs to feed the homeless, say, I'd like more information on programs to feed the homeless, and you can refer the item, you can defer the item, those sorts of things. But you know, the item here is been put on by a member of council, Natalie Harris, who there's an existing program. You receive the same weekly updates that we all do.
that says this program, among others, Ms. McAlpine provides us with all the information about all the programs currently assisting the homeless in our community. Every week, we get that email from Ms. McAlpine, and it includes this item. So a counselor has now said she would like permission for them to do what they do in Heritage Park. If you're opposed, which I think you just indicated, no problem. If you'd like to move an amendment, no problem, but please deal with the item that's on the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. And let's be crystal clear here. I was not offending anybody or intending to offend anybody. I was asking questions about the homeless. And this is about feeding the homeless. So I'm not going to go back and forth with you. I respect that. But I do have an item that I want to refer this motion until we get a report back from the County of Simcoe.
Okay, so there's an amendment. It's a referral motion, which is non-debatable. Councillor McCann is indicating that the item be, I guess, referred to staff, or I think you want to defer it, Mike. So if you want to wait for the county to make their presentation first before we approve this, is that the intent?
I would like more information, yes. From your office and from the county.
So the motion for this item then would be to defer this until the presentations are made. Yes?
Why not refer it?
Refer it to who?
Refer it to, sorry, defer it then, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so to defer this item until we receive the presentation from the county and or my office on the programs. Councillor Riepma, deferral motion is debatable. Go ahead.
Yes, I just checked that, and deferral is debatable. I guess the question that I have, maybe to Councillor Natalie Harris, is what's the impact of deferring this? Because we may not get this report from Simcoe for months and months. So what would be the impact, Councillor Harris?
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Councillor Riepma. I believe the report's coming back in April from the county, so that's great news. And I fear changing and not addressing it tonight or waiting is not really the best approach to. We really have an issue right now with where this breakfast can be served all the time. So literally tomorrow morning, there will be a breakfast served. Right now, it does happen in front of Collier Church. And I do have another amendment as well to clarify how long this will go, et cetera. And it is still happening in front of Collier Church, but this is a backup plan as well that I'll share more information about when I speak to it. Because the opportunities of where they are able to serve are becoming very limited. So I don't think it's a good idea to push this away for any time. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And I also agree with your proposal. I don't think we should be deferring this because homelessness, we can't just defer. It's there. And I think we need to deal with it. And it's only going to be for an hour in the park. And I know you and I had this discussion about your subsequent amendment, and it's for a year. It seems to me that that's not a bad trial period. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and we can cut it off. But in the meantime, it is definitely something that I think is needed, and it seems to me that we should pursue it rather than defer it.
Thanks, Councillor Riepma. Others on the amendment to defer? Councillor Natalie Harris and then Councillor Gary Harvey.
I'm not sure if maybe it would be prudent for me to bring up my amendment to clarify a couple more things about what the full motion would be. I know it kind of is backwards, but my amendment does address how often it would happen and that it would be taking into consideration any booked events that were already at Heritage Park and that they wouldn't serve the breakfast then. I wish I had already had that in the motion already. Again, that's just extra info to come, hopefully, but.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Gary Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Just a couple of questions for the mover of the motion. I am very supportive of it. Obviously, it seems like They're very well set up. They've already going to be providing $5 million worth of insurance. Just kind of curious roughly what kind of numbers they anticipate each morning, because it's actually 2 hours and 15 minutes, not an hour. I'm just kind of curious number wise, because I know obviously there's other providers too in the downtown area.
Yeah, no, thank you through you, Mayor Lehman. So that time frame from 7:45 to 11 is for cleanup as well. The actual breakfast service is only 1 hour and it's very strict. It's 8 o'clock till 9. They make breakfast to put in different areas at Collier Church. There's like a cupboard where you can put books, etc. They'll put breakfast in there as well. But it's finished at 9 and 10 o'clock is pushing it. Like usually we're out of there in 15 minutes and the cleanup's quite simple and people disperse as they get their breakfasts and go to wherever else they were going that day. And with reference to, for example, the Salvation Army was originally letting that happen in the parking lot and that had to change because of snow removal. And now that COVID is allowing staff to return, then that staff parking is kind of required. So it wasn't necessarily an issue with garbage, et cetera, or anything like that. It's very specific. It's 1 hour that the service is. And like I said, the motion coming forward that I will bring is sharing as well that it's a backup plan. Hopefully it will keep on going with Collier, but and any booked community events at Heritage Park it will be known, and then in advance we can let the people that come for breakfast know that it's at this place instead on this one particular day a few times out of a year. So yeah.
Great. And just a follow up, because obviously their current location being a church is very different than a gazebo in a park. Does the gazebo truly fulfill their requirements? Like, are they in need of hydro to keep things warm, that type of thing?
No, thank you through you, Mayor Lehman. That's a great question. The ultimate dream is to have a location that has hydro with a fridge. Right now they're using Collier. Oh no, they're actually using Burton Church as the storage area for all of their perishables. They do daily food rescues. That's how they collect everything every day. The dream is to have a location where they can store all of their items that are donated, the food, etc. So everything that's brought every morning is just in baskets. It's donated from different amazing community restaurants, etc. and dispersed very quickly. Coffee that's just made at the church, and the garbage is there, put the garbage. And like I said, people will get there. We would love for a place to actually have a community area for these individuals to even stay and eat breakfast, but that just doesn't even really exist. So they go about their day. I hope that helps.
Right. And just one last little follow up, because potentially depending on the numbers, there could be a substantive amount of garbage. Are they expected to remove the garbage, or is there any assistance that would be required from city staff?
No, so it is part of the motion that it is Ryan's Hope's responsibility to make sure that the garbage is collected. And like I said, it's been going for about a year. That's a very limited concern that's been happening. Most people leave with their garbage, or they're collecting a couple breakfasts for multiple people and they go, and that's it. And then at the Salvation Army, there actually was the garbage there that we could put everything in right away, and it would be the responsibility for sure of Ryan's Hope. And then of course there's obviously sometimes people don't follow those rules and maybe they're around a little bit longer and they would linger and litter, but that was not really a concern over the last year that this has been happening.
And just one last follow up, if I could, Mayor Lehman, where I was actually kind of going with this is what additional assistance the city could actually provide, and would something like some of the bag tags in kind, that type of thing, assist them? Because obviously if they're taking it, let's say home, you're only allowed 2 bags every 2 weeks. So then obviously there's going to be a cost to dump and things like that.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's something we can definitely talk about even maybe after today. Yeah, the Ryan's Hope brings the garbage with them. You're right. So it doesn't even stay there. It goes with them to their home and then they dispose it there. That would be wonderful. I'm sure they would love that.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman.
Thanks, Councillor Harvey. I do want to move to a vote on the amendment. The amendment is to defer this. Any other comments on the amendment? Councillor McCann, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I just wanted to maybe touch on some of the comments that Councillor Harvey suggested, that the gazebo being like an excellent spot. I can't remember the specifics, Ms. McAlpine, but did they not have a program somewhat like this at Sam Kinsilla's gazebo, and wasn't that not maybe the best outcome?
Ms. McAlpine.
Mayor Lehman, through you to Councillor McCann, Sam Kinsella Park was not utilized for the breakfast program. There was a period of time when people were utilizing it as shelter, and there were concerns for fire code and carbon monoxide poisoning, along with other concerns raised by the community, which is why it was removed.
I appreciate that. And maybe this is my last maybe push to try to get council to support this deferral. Ms. Harris, Councilor Harris, can you let me know when this is supposed to start? I'm looking at a start date at hand. I don't see one.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and we can maybe add some clarification that this again is a backup. So they will be continuing at the Collier Church, out front of the Collier Church, but because there are some, it's just sometimes not really a forever promise of how long they can keep this. It's a hope in the future. And another hope is if, for example, the Collier Church says, okay, you know, we've done our turn with this and we want to move on, and we had this set up, it's a more ideal central location. So the Collier Church is up Mulcaster Hill. There's people that have accessibility issues. It's not a really central location for people to go and get breakfast quickly. That's why we are seeing people come and collect for like 4 people at a time, etc. So Heritage Park is a little bit more central.
You know, Councilor Harris, I live by a few business mantras, and one of my mantras is, when your vision is cloudy, so will your results be. And I believe, Robert Sharma quoted that. And I live that. Every project that I do, if I can't see a clear vision, I don't do it, right? And I'm not seeing a clear vision here. I absolutely want to help. Don't I think I'm misguiding that I don't want to help Ryan's Hope. But that location is going to impact thousands of people on a daily basis. And I ride my bike literally 7 months from my house, which is near Manette's Point, all the way to past Mike's house, over on the North Trail. And so I see that at that time period, pretty much 8 days a week. And I know what impact that's going to have in our community. And I maybe feel like I kind of feel like I'm being the bad guy here, but I'm trying to be the good guy that has a win-win-win for everybody here at the city. If you don't have a start date and we're getting a presentation by Simcoe County, could you support my amendment by deferring this for a month and a half, right? And in that time, I'll give you my word and work with you that maybe we find another location. And I will give you hours of my time to come up with a better solution. But for me to do that, I need to have your support and move it forward. And I don't think it's going to interrupt your flow at all, because I didn't realize that this was a second location, right? I mean, is that in here? Am I just not reading it properly, or is that something you were going to amend later on?
Yeah, I do have an amendment. You're right.
For that this is not a go-to. So therefore, that would give us time. Does that make sense to you?
Through you, Mayor Lehman. So I have 2 things to say. First of all, I would love to have conversations about an alternative location. Ideally, that would be amazing. This is literally a backup because we need to have a place for this program, and we're looking to the future and making sure that if something happens, because that's all we've seen through COVID is things change and we don't know where we're going to have this happen. That would be great. But I also think that maybe your concerns about not having people have a bag of food given to them for an hour at Heritage Park is disturbing the community. And I really welcome you to join me when we serve, because it's not the case. Like, people line up and follow direction, and we give dog food to dogs and cat food to people that need cats, have cats. And it's just community quickly. And then they literally go on their way. It's not maybe the same concerns as what you're hearing from warming center concerns and people staying in the bus terminal. That's just not what we see. They're very grateful. They're very happy that this is being offered, and they move on their way. I still don't want to change the outcome of potentially what could happen today to have that as a backup plan. But I 100% would love to still chat with you about an alternative, because I agree there for sure is a better option, and we just haven't been able to find it yet. The funding is huge. They just don't have funding for that.
Thank you, Councillor. I am going to ask if we could get your support on deferring this. We're going to have Simcoe County here in April, right? And I just feel that there's a better way, a better plan. I know we have two councillors, two heads working together. 1 + 1 = 3. That's synergy, right? And we can create some synergy to come with a better plan. I just don't want to leave tonight, have the public believe that we're going to have a situation in our waterfront, right? Because a lot of people do feel the way that you think they do because of what happens in our downtown. So I'm going to stop talking because I feel like I'm carrying on saying the same point maybe over and over again, and that's not my intent. But my intent right here, right now, is to get your support from that deferral.
And again, through you, Mayor Lehman, I do appreciate what you're saying. My concern is if Collier Church says, you know what, we aren't able to do this tomorrow, there would literally be nowhere for Ryan's Hope to serve the breakfast program. And it really, I really like, maybe this conversation is really great. And I know you feel like you're being the bad guy, but it's an opportunity to really share with the community the myths that are surrounding this breakfast program. It just doesn't cause those issues. Like they really are. I have my son who's 16 and he's been volunteering with me for almost a year there. And I wouldn't bring my son who's 16 every Sunday morning to do this if it was a danger to him. The people that were serving breakfast know him by name. And it's amazing, the community coming together and being able, they're just so grateful for this breakfast, especially through COVID when things have been so difficult with Salvation Army being able to provide it, etc. Ryan's Hope has stepped up to the plate and really filled a gap that occurred because of COVID. And I believe that you and I can work together and find a better place. And that is the end result of this great conversation for sure. But I just can't support moving forward and not having an option because those individuals are really dependent upon this every day. So.
Great. Councillor Aylwin, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I've had the opportunity to volunteer the Breakfast to Go program at Collier, outside Collier Church, and previously outside the Salvation Army. I can tell you a few things. Never once have I, felt unsafe. Never once have I seen anything that Councillor McCann may find unacceptable. I think the thing we need to remember here is that people who are accessing this breakfast are people. Period. They're people. There are community. They're community members. There are neighbors, and I think having community members gather for a community breakfast is a wonderful thing. Whether it's in front of Collier United, whether it's in Heritage Park, that's what parks are for. Is for community gatherings and for people coming together and building that sense of community. So we really need to stop with the harmful othering of people who are experiencing homelessness in our community. They are deserving of dignity. Everyone is deserving of dignity, period. And we're all human beings. So I think that needs to be at the center of everything that we do. And that's what this motion recognizes, and I'm with Councillor Natalie Harris on this. It's an important program, an important community gathering space, and we need to make sure that it can continue.
Thanks, Councillor Owen. I would like to call a question on the amendment unless there are any further comments. I'm not going to support the amendment. If you're opposed to something, just vote against it. I don't think we should defer things. Just if you're against it, vote against it. Give your reasons. If you're in favor, support it. I'm not in favor of deferring it, so I'm going to vote against the amendment, and I'll call the question. Those in favor of the amendment, please indicate. Opposed to the amendment? I am as well. The amendment's defeated. The main motion's on the floor is printed. Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. So it's kind of listening to everybody go back and forth and very valid points. Initially, I'm hesitant to, and I wrote some thoughts here. Initially, I'm a little bit hesitant to support kind of a reactive motion to set up a social service in a park. However, what I like about the motion is it gets eyes on the streets in the gazebo. It's going to ensure it's going to get cleaned. It ensures it becomes a more conducive environment. Right now, that's not necessarily the case. That gazebo in the mornings, might be littered with beer bottles, maybe have a little bit of urination, may have other things that are not desirable. So while it's not ideal that we even have to get to the situation, again, getting that presence there and reading your motion, the commitment they've made to cleaning it and operating it makes it a bit more of a conducive environment. And as Councillor Alwyn said, if the parks are for people, it just kind of maybe makes it a better feel. Another analogy I kind of came up with while people were talking about this issue is this is kind of like a food truck. We're essentially just giving permission for a food truck to be there, except there's no truck and it's free. So, if that's the case, we've got a trial period to it, and so be it. If it becomes a little bit detrimental, then we'll have to assess it. But again, I tried for me again to separate away the social response to it and say how, if this was a food truck permit, how would we look at it? So, and then also I guess these comments are just general. It's just very sad that we have to get to this point. It's sad that this is a reality. I don't think anybody wants to have something like this in a park, but I think what really convinced me was your amendment that it's not even in the motion yet. You're going to amend it to make it a year temporary pilot. So thank you, Mayor Lehman.
Yes, Councillor Harris, did you want to move that amendment?
Sure, let's do that. Okay. My amendment is as follows, that to add the following to paragraph 1 for a year trial period, and that dates of community functions where the Heritage Park gazebo is booked for other events be provided to Ryan's Hope so that it can serve breakfast at a different location on these days. I think we've already spoken enough to it, and again, I get it. It doesn't say a start date, but it's just we're asking for the provision of this as an opportunity if need be. And right now, it wouldn't be starting. We need a backup. We need somewhere for this to go.
Okay, so the amendment's on the floor to make it a 1-year trial period, and the dates for community functions when the gazebo is booked for other events be provided to Ryan's Hope so that they can make alternate plans. On the amendment, Councillor Jim Harris.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lehman, and thank you, Councillor Harris. I was pretty clear, and then recognizing that Ryan's Hope is looking to have a more permanent location. That got me thinking about, okay, so what of those discussions? And maybe I'm a step ahead, so maybe I'll try to stop myself because it might be a long night ahead, but just curious around things like, for decades, Salvation Army has provided lunch and dinner in Barrie, and that was interrupted from the pandemic, as you noted. So what will the impact of them getting back online be with relation to volume for this? Also, and I thought Councilor Morales's food truck analogy was really great. And I agree with you. I had the pleasure of being a volunteer on the Busby outreach van for many years. And we would do evening food delivery at back of the Salvation Army parking lot. And the people were the most gracious, humble, and well-ordered people waiting for a line of something. It was really quite great. So I had no problems in that. So it just made me wonder, and if, in those discussions with those, and for years, Busby had, open at 9 o'clock, coffee, donuts, whatever they get from the food bank. So when those things come back online, where does Ryan's Hope seem to fit in with? Because again, we look at over the history of trying to better serve our homeless in Barrie, we've tried to better coordinate those services too. And Councillor McCann made some points around the synergies, which was part of the method behind Pathways, which I believe has vaporized. But at one point, there was a significant effort to coordinate efforts for homeless people, marginalized citizens, so that we had effective, one-stop, easy access for the things they needed. So my only concern would be is, are we creating another place, another part of the system? How will Ryan's Hope coordinate with what is currently available, what's currently been operational and effective in the city? Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lehman. Thank you for the question, Councillor Harris. I can assure you, Ryan's Hope has been working with those agencies the entire time. And this also highlights, like, we're serving almost 150 people in the summer in front of the Salvation Army. And so many of those individuals still can't use the Salvation Army because even if they wanted to, when it was open during COVID or go to Busby, there are limitations to individuals being able to use those services. This is just literally a counter and another counter with baskets of food that really anyone could walk up to and use. There's no processing through to get permission to be there. And I wish that the Busby van was still available. That was an amazing thing and great opportunity to open up that conversation again to see why we can how we can maybe make that happen. The fact is, and I agree, are we duplicating services, etc.? We are serving so many people every morning, therefore there's a need. We must do it. COVID is, opening things up again, but we've 50% increased our homeless in our term. And it's Busby, it's not fair even for Busby and Salvation Army, etc., to have that all on them with very limited funding. It was difficult to get funding just for the warming center. And this is just donations and complete volunteer hours and care and compassion. We can't say no to it. It's just, to me, it doesn't even fall into the same category. Great work with Busby and the Salvation Army and all of those EFRI do. This is no barrier. Come and get breakfast quickly, grab a coffee, grab a hot chocolate, and you're on your way. And it's just not that simple with other services sometimes.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. And I look forward to the discussion. I'm supportive of the amendment and looking forward to the discussions that will come about as they look for a more permanent place and how that gets coordinated with other partners. Thank you.
Okay, on the amendment, any further comments? Okay, seeing none, those in favor of the amendment? Any opposed? None. That carries. On the main motion as amended. Any further comments? Seeing none. Those in favor of the main motion as amended. Oh, okay, sorry. Go ahead, Councilor McCann.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Maybe I can address this to Don McAlpine, if you don't mind, please. I am not crystal clear on what all agencies are working together. And we were just about to pass this item of discussion that we're now going to have another agency using a city facility on our waterfront. And obviously I have another week to process this and ask questions and come back to city council. And this council looks like it's almost going to be unanimous, maybe other than myself on this. And I just want to make it really clear to council, to staff, to the public, to the newspapers that I want to help. I am just looking at this location and I just think it's the wrong location, right? So maybe I can ask Councilor Natalie Harris why this location of all locations that the city property have.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, Ms. McAlpin and I have had lots of amazing conversations about that, to be honest. And she even came and visited the warming center this Friday. And I'd like to say thank you to that. It is just basically the best option that we came. We looked at all the gazebos. We looked at where certain events might be occurring or not, and what would be the best access for these individuals that just need to show up, grab a bag and go. And that was the safest that we figured out. Again, this is not the be all and end all. For sure, a permanent location would be so much better. But this, and again, not Ms. McAlpine didn't say this is the best. She gave me options, and this was the one that I came forward and thought would be the best option right now.
Well, I'd like to make a little proposal with you that you do invite me this week before next week's city council meeting. And I would like to get firsthand knowledge, serving, helping out, understanding the practice. I am going to vote no tonight because I want the public to know that I am firmly against this location, but I'm not against helping them. And I'm sure I'll be looked upon as the bad guy, but guess what? That's okay. I feel that strongly about this. And I would really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule. I know you've got big plans, but to help me understand better. And if you could do that sometime, if we can talk after council and give me a schedule.
100%. And everyone is welcomed at any time to join and help serve. And
Actually, if you don't mind, I just wanted you and I.
Amen.
I want to ask a lot of questions, and I want to have a lot of people there. I'd like to have Ryan's Hope there if possible.
Yeah.
I don't want L Council there, please. Okay.
I look forward to showing you where the myths lie.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to comment? Okay, call the question on the motion as amended. Those in favor? Opposed? One carries. Okay, next item that was held is with regards to a grant for Cornerstone. It was held by Deputy Mayor Ward.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Hopefully this will be shorter, but I'm not sure it will be. I put the motion on the floor and I'll introduce an amendment. And my amendment is that the motion be amended by reducing the amount to $158,263, representing 100% of the City of Barrie development charge fees paid for the proposed Cornerstone to Recovery Women's Residential Addiction Facility at 236 Dunlop Street West, with funding from the Tax Rate Stabilization Reserve of $118,697.68. Water Stabilization Reserve, $14,243.75, and the Wastewater Stabilization Reserve, $25,322.21, and adding the following paragraph: that correspondence be sent to the school boards asking that they consider waiving or rebating development charge fees for the Cornerstone to Recovery Women's Residential Addiction Facility, and I'll speak to that.
Okay, thank you. So this would be yeah, it's an amendment, but it really replaces the existing language to reduce the amount to just the city's development charges, but it is 100% of the city development charge, and then asking the school boards to waive their development charges. Okay, go ahead, Deputy Mayor Ward.
The reason I've introduced this is because we are actually waiving the school board's development charges, or we're not waiving them. They've already been paid. By the way, these development charges have been paid by the organization. We're giving them a grant to cover it. And I don't think we should not be rebating the school board's portions of the development charges, only our own portion. I know we're going to have a debate in a second about whether we should do it at all, but I'm hoping that at least this is where we're going to start from. We're going to start from rebating the city's development charges, not the school boards. I don't think the school board would for a second consider rebating their fees to us. I don't think we should rebate theirs. And I'm hoping that they'll see the light of this and say, yes, this is a good program and we'll waive the development charges or rebate the development charges. But I don't think it's within our power to rebate the school board's development charges. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Ward. On the amendment, Councillor Thompson.
I have an amendment to the amendment.
All right, okay, we can do that. Go ahead.
And my amendment is to reduce the amount to zero. And I can speak to that.
I think that's actually a separate amendment, Councillor Thompson. If you were changing what Deputy Ward was proposing, I think that would be an amendment to the amendment, but you want to do something different to the original motion. So what I'm just going to suggest procedurally, let's deal with Deputy Mayor Ward's, then you can move yours. Okay?
No problem.
Okay. On Deputy Mayor Ward's amendment, which is to reduce the amount to the city's development charges and ask the school board to waive them. Does anyone wish to speak? Councillor Natalie Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. We've chatted about this through the week, and I do think it's fair. I think it's basically we've circulated information. Thank you for Mr. Miller about what precedent was set by Redwood, and it was the 75%. And just very important. Yeah, I love how we also address these charges were already paid, and that's half of what we've loaned them for operating the Women's Recovery Center. So if they need to continue and not receive that, it's going to make delivering this much more difficult. And having development charges for a recovery center that is operated basically from funding that comes from textile diversion bins and not even yet funded through the province, et cetera, is really putting a strain on an already very, it's going to put a strain on the delivery of the services in the first place. So I think it's a great amendment. Barrie Ward, I think it's Deputy Mayor Ward is very fair and represents what has happened before with Redwood.
Thanks for that. Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Curiously, I think Deputy Mayor Ward is correct that we should not be waiving the Board of Education fees. So I'm not quite sure how I'm going to vote on this one, because I'm also, I think, with Councillor Thompson that we have a policy that has been developed and has been applied to others, and I think we should stick with that. So I'm of two minds of this, but I think that Deputy Mayor Ward is definitely trying to be fair here and make sense.
Thanks, Councillor Riepma. On Deputy Mayor Ward's amendment, any further comments? Okay, seeing none, call the question. Those in favor of Deputy Mayor Ward's amendment? Anybody opposed? One, okay. Councillor Thompson, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Lehman.
So that carries, and that's where we are now. What Deputy Mayor Ward has moved, and you would like to reduce that amount to zero, Councillor Thompson, right?
So I have an amendment to the amended motion to remove and reduce the amount to zero in grant funding. And I can speak to that.
Okay, so essentially you're just defeating this motion that's on the floor. There's no real amendment to it, or are you moving something
Yeah,
else?
I guess
Councillor
maybe
Thompson?
I could just speak to the amended
think you
motion and we
just
can
speak to-
vote yes or no and just make it cleaner that way, Mayor Lynn. Thank you, through you. So, Mayor Lehman, I had a lot of trouble with this for the simple reason, this is exactly what this community needs. This is something that we've all spoke of, and it's a service. It's a health service that we need. And Councillor Natalie Harris has worked, tirelessly, and yourself, Mayor Lehman, with this group and stuff. But to Councillor Riepma's point, we have a policy, and I believe if you don't like the policy, then we need to change the policy. We've got to stop the picking of the winners. So I don't think this council can afford to do this to every single application that comes forward for a nonprofit. And when you just factor in some numbers, if the goal is to get them to 0 and 100% of the DCs, well, Redwood's DCs were reduced by 75%. They actually took it upon themselves to apply for this CIP for the remaining 25, which Cornerstone could apply for the CIP. There's an intake form still today that's available. They chose not to. And so by removing that, it's 157,000. So the serviceable debt on a $400,000 loan for 20 years at today's interest, and Mr. Miller can correct me if I'm wrong, is about 156,000. Now, we see what interest rates are going. It could actually carry about 200,000 at 4.25%. So with this amendment, this motion as it's written, we're actually giving them 150% of their DCs in return. And like I said, we give them an opportunity for a revenue stream by removing that from diabetes, the Kidney Foundation, Salvation Army. This was a sole sourced entity on city property where, Newmarket and Aurora had a tendering process for textile. We had Bricks, an organization of that wanted to use that as a revenue source that we removed. So this is so hard for me because I'm such a believer this is what the community needs, but I think we've been fair and equitable to Cornerstone, and working with Councillor Natalie Harris, I was actually the one who moved the amendment to allow the $400,000, with support of council. But we worked on something to get them here. And, I think we've shown, and truth be told, it's on the extension of a building. If they would have purchased a building that facilitated what they needed, they wouldn't have to pay DCs, but they saved money by buying a smaller building. And now they're renovating it to provide a service, but I just think that we got to keep consistent. And going forward, if members of council don't think non-for-profits should pay DCs and stuff, then we should have that conversation around the table and change the policy. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Thompson was obviously speaking. We're not on an amendment. We're on the motion that Deputy Mayor Ward has or provided by way of amendment. So Councillor Thompson speaking against that. Obviously, I think everybody knows what his position is, but that's where we are procedurally. Go ahead, Councillor Gary Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Question for Mr. Miller, a little bit of clarification just to kind of get a little more apples to apples here when it comes to Redwood. Because I know we did ask for clarification back on the 3rd of March. So I'm just going through that email, and it appears that their DCs were reduced by 50% as a result of being a not-for-profit. And then they were provided with a 75% subsidy. Am I safe in assuming that those numbers that were provided were outside of any education DCs that would have been involved in that?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harvey. So it's all in the DC numbers. So it includes both the city and the school board. So as you noted, council approved a 75% grant. And as Councillor Thompson described, they recovered the remaining 25% through the CIP process, which covered both city and school board.
And just a follow-up, if I could, is there any reason why Cornerstone wouldn't qualify for a CIP for that other 25 if we had an agreement similar to Redwood?
Through you, Councillor Lehman, I would probably defer this question to Ms. Banfield beside me.
Ms. Banfield.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harvey. So Cornerstone absolutely could apply for a CIP. There is an intake open right now for the first round of 2022 funding. The CIP, applying for a CIP, though, does not guarantee your funding. All of the applications are reviewed by the CIP committee, which is made up of 3 EMT members. So while they could apply, I wouldn't be able to guarantee the value of the funding or what would be available to Cornerstone this evening.
Great, thank you. I struggle in supporting this, although it is a very good agency and it's something that's very well needed here in the city. But I think we set a precedence by the Redwood decision, and now we're going to set another precedence if we pass this tonight. So I struggle by continually pushing the envelope here. And these organizations know that they're going to have to pay some type of DCs, especially when you're talking about an addition onto an existing building. So I really struggle with supporting it in the current form that it's in.
Thanks, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Raper.
Yes, thank you. I struggle the same way, Councillor Harvey and Councillor Natalie Harris. I really, in my heart, I want to open the floodgates and give them the money. But that's just not responsible in terms of this council. I think we need to treat all of these agencies similar to them as consistently. And we have already set a policy and a precedent with Redwood. I think we need to stick with that. I think there is an opportunity that through the CIP, it's not guaranteed, but there is an opportunity that they might be able to get more money. But yeah, I think you know, we also have an obligation to the rest of the city that we need to watch taxpayers' dollars very carefully. And I think in this case, we need to apply the policies even-handedly. And this organization is definitely really important, and their service is really important, particularly because it's for women, and there aren't any for women. So I really struggle with not being on side, but in this case, I just can't see us doing it and doing it right. So thanks.
Thanks, Councilor Rima. Councilor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Through you to somebody, what's the current use of the building?
Banfield.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councilor Morales, there's a building permit for Cornerstone already. It's been issued. So they're starting the renovations and the addition to turn it into the treatment center. I believe it was a house to begin with. And as I said, now they're doing the addition, and they already have a building permit for those, that addition and then the change of use.
Perfect. That change of use, does it change the zoning from residential R1, 2, or 3 to commercial?
Through your Mayor Lehman to Council Morales, a rezoning wasn't required. No.
Okay, perfect. So it can be assumed that the tax rate would remain the same?
Sorry, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Morales, your question was related to the tax rebate, so they can apply for exemption or section 357, which we encourage them to contact our tax department if they want to go forward with that as well.
Perfect, thank you. The basis of those questions was so I can get a better understanding. So DCs are meant to pay essentially for the infrastructure related to growth we allow. This may technically be an extension substantial enough that it requires DCs, but to me, it's essentially just a reinvigoration of an existing facility, a very fancy reno. So I'm a little bit willing to support it. I do share the concerns about the deviating from policy. But again, this almost speaks to your other motion, Councillor Natalie Harris. You're rising up to the challenges that we're having because we're bursting at the seams, whether it be with social services, whether it be with funding for organizations that step up to fill a void. Do I think we need to look at it comprehensively? Yes. But at the same time, here we are now. In addition to that, the province put forward on the affordability task force report, or the task force published the report. And one of those motions, one of those points, if it goes through, actually says that waiving all DCs for infill developments of less than 10 units, which if this is considered a development, if that became law, Cornerstone might, and I'm saying might because I'm not technical enough to say it, so they might actually have the DCs waived. So this is the kind of innovative thinking that the task force already identified for anything under less than 10 units, which I presume is going to be just considered one DC charge. So I'm a little bit willing to do that. Specifically in terms of DC, it's going to pay for infrastructure, pays for roads, pays for those kind of those things, and knowing where the location is, which I won't like specifically say here in public, it's an area that I don't expect there to be like lots of cars, right? Like the people going to the centers, they might have a car, but it's not necessarily a one that's high in areas. So at the moment, I'm leaning towards supporting it, but I do also share the concerns about doing this as a one-off. So again, I also commend you, like the other counselors. Thank you for stepping up to address this. It might just be bad timing, but we either need to comprehensively review our policies or let the province take care of it.
Thanks, Councilor Morales. Any other comments? Deputy Mayor Ward.
Yeah, I mean, I also support the motion that's on the floor. And I think, it's sort of taking off what Councillor Morales said. I mean, we do not charge DCs on second suites. We do not charge them on garden suites. At least I don't believe we do. And I think we can't. And I think that's because it's a recognition we have a housing crisis in Ontario, and that one way to do it is to make more housing available. And I think we also have an opioid crisis going on in Ontario, and certainly in the city of Barrie. And I think in my mind, this is a similar thing. We are going to waive these to do everything possible to address this opioid crisis in Barrie. I think it's a worthy project. Going back to the one that was on the Redwood homes, we waived the charges there. And if I wish that back then I sort of thought about the idea that we shouldn't be waiving the school board's charges. It worked out to kind of the same thing when we gave them 75 or only gave them 75%. But I think if it's a housing crisis, an opioid crisis, I think there are certain projects we should get behind and help them in any way we can. And this is one of the projects that I think is well worth supporting. There is a cost, but I think there's a cost to the opioid crisis as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Ward. Councillor Natalie Harris, then Councillor Rob Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and thank you for the conversation around the table for sure. You know, I guess my highlight is we want to encourage more agencies like this to come to the city. And I love that, you know, looking to the future, our task forces with the province, et cetera, are really encouraging, you know, creative thinking and stepping outside the box, because the cost of the opioid crisis and the cost to all of the social services surrounding when these 12 women otherwise wouldn't have been able to receive treatment is exponential. We don't know what that cost is. That's a very difficult number to find. It goes into, you know, expenses with families and home, families, children, daycare, etc. It's difficult to calculate. So I'm very much in favor of doing a comprehensive review further going forward for sure. I think that we set a precedent with Redwood, and Cornerstone did try to buy a building that wasn't going to need an extension, and they tried so hard and it fell through at the very end, not because of Cornerstone's fault. And they searched very high and low with the help, and they have so much praise for staff for helping them to even find and locate this new location where this, and for what it's worth, the extension will have a garden on it. Is that a garden? I don't know. It literally will. And that's for safety of the women, so that they are not on the roadway and they're above where the extension is. It's a rooftop garden. And then it will just contain the 12 rooms, and the original house right now was converted into an office building, but it was a home originally. So that's kind of where I'm standing with this. I think they would definitely be willing to come forward and apply for the CIP for the 25% that maybe they won't receive from the school boards, but and I see for sure on the side of all the counselors that are looking at, you know, the money that would have been coming in or did come in, and we would be obviously rebating it and where we could use that. But the cost is exponential if we don't encourage these services to come to our city. This is the bare minimum. This is skimming the surface on the treatment that we need for the opioid crisis. 12 beds for women, the first in the county of Simcoe. Like that is just out of control. That is not even going to be close to what we actually need. So let's encourage others to come forward and really make it a welcoming city for us to be able to take care and really treat the opioid crisis right now. And it's not just the opioid crisis, it's a mental health emergency. It's so many different things. And for women, especially, the barriers that exist for women to getting treatment is exponential as well, because they are primarily the caregivers of the children in their home, and they don't want to leave the city and they don't want to go to a different place to receive treatment. This is a life-saving, and I know that all the counselors, I know we all know that, and please don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it in a mean way that you're saying that this wouldn't be it, but I really think it's important to highlight Cornerstone really did try to find a building that was already built and would just need modifications, and that just didn't work out. And this is something we need now, and it is the right thing to do to make sure that they aren't paying DCs for an extension for 12 beds for a women's treatment center.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor Thompson, then I would like to call the question.
Thank you, Mayor Newman. Just listen, when we deal with stuff like this, it gets very emotional. And the thing is, we got to state the facts. So Deputy Mayor Ward stating that, you know, this is an opioid crisis and everything. Let's be honest, they're here already. they're building it. So the Redwood, it was actually Mayor Lehman who moved the motion for the 25% grant because that was the deal breaker to get it built. And that's why we bent the bylaw to do it. Our $400,000 loan facilitated them coming here because when they were looking at the property that Councillor Harris speaks of, prices were a little bit more than their budget. So it was for their capital purchase. They went and bought a single home to build this. So the savings was already there. But the facts are the DCs, we are actually funding them 150% at this motion. And I understand it's, but you know, and I know Cornerstone likes to, you know, their motto is no government money. This is a health emergency. We haven't seen $1 from the province in this. Like, you turn on any newspaper anywhere in North America, this is out of control. And here we are the least funded, the most headaches, with the least power, and we're asked to fund everything for this. You know, and like I said, the emotional stuff, yeah, it's great, but you know, if we don't start using our head, we're gonna have nothing left to do with our heart. So we need to start really looking at this, and we need to lobby the levels of government that have the mandate for health. And you know, and that's where it needs to start, because like the emotions got everybody looking at this at 150%. And then you're going to say about a housing crisis, and we've got a ton of them, and we're going to have a ton of applications. We need to look at where we spend our money. So like I said, you know, with all due respect, it's the Redwood deal was an anomaly to attract and to get it done. This organization was attracted by a $400,000 20-year interest-free loan. And we facilitated that. They don't need the DCs to be here. The DCs may help in programming, but I really wish the other people who are supposed to be worried about programming start worrying about it instead of the 11 people around this table.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Members of council, we got to keep moving here. We got 3 more items. Everybody's had a lot of chance to speak to this. So very quick comment, please. Councillor Natalie Harris, Councillor Jim Harris, quick comment, please.
Yeah, very quick. I agree, Councillor Thompson. And it's been on, we are definitely lobbying the province for money. It's been so far that Cornerstone has never received funding, but that is an in motion process happening right now. I hope that that's what comes to fruition, and I agree that that's a different level of government that needs to look at this as well. But Cornerstone was really wanting to buy that original home and use the $400,000 loan, obviously, for that. I think we also have to look at this. It was an extenuating circumstance that just couldn't fall. It didn't go through. And there's so many reasons why, unfortunately, and they were crushed. This should have been opened already in June. And now we're in a different location because that was really the only location that was going to be feasible. So they didn't really sign up for wanting to pay DCs. They wanted to have the money and the loan to be able to get the property and do the retros that they needed. But it's a big hit to what their funding would be because that original location fell through. And I see what you're saying, but that's why we're here right now.
Okay, Councillor Jim Harris.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Lynn. I don't believe I had a chance to speak on this yet, so I thank you for the opportunity. You know, I think Councillor Thompson makes some very good points. They already are here, and just had a question for staff. I think I might know the answer, but are there any other social service providers, maybe through you, Mary Lynn, to Ms. McAlpine, who we provide ongoing support with revenue source?
Mayor Lehman, through you to Councillor Jim Harris, we provide funding to the county since they're the service delivery agent for social services in this area.
Thank you. So there would be no arrangements similar to what we've done with the soul sourcing of textile recycling with Cornerstone.
Mayor Lehman, through you to Councillor Jim Harris, I can't think of any other similar arrangements where we've provided an opportunity for an organization to receive revenues through use of city property off the top of my head.
Great, thank you. And I think that, I mean, we're using the Redwood exception as a new bar, and I think Councillor Thompson makes a good point. You know, on top of what we've done, and let's be clear, we've done a lot, and Councillor Thompson brought forward the motion for the $400,000 loan, interest-free, which facilitated their arrival here. But we also sole source textile recycling, which we know was a competitive. We actually was part of the model for the Bricks, who were going to bring together makerspace in downtown Barrie, and we turned them down. That was part of their business model. So, which we wanted more information about. I'm worried a bit because with regarding to health, which I know a little bit about, Central Region has 3 priorities right now. One is the opioid crisis. So if you're in the business of providing addiction services, you should be well aware that there's money provincially for services. So I would really encourage the Cornerstone folks to speak to their Ministry of Health representative and see about where they fit in the funding priorities. So it's hard because I don't want it to seem in the reference that we're not doing enough. I mean, when is enough enough, I guess, is the question, but we're doing quite a bit. And I think, you know, no one's corrected Councillor Thompson's math that 150% of DCs is not accurate. So with that being said, and a sole sourced ongoing revenue source that nobody else has the privilege of, not, excuse me, not Youth Haven, not Season Center, not CMHA, Busby, Ryan's Hope. I mean, go down the list. I mean, so I think we've done really well by Cornerstone. So I really want to make sure that it's represented here that Barrie City Council has done a great deal to facilitate a women's treatment facility here in the city of Barrie. So how far do we go? How many precedents do we set? And it's been said before by, I think it was Deputy Mayor Ward, if you don't like the policy, change the policy. So here we are, you know, not changing the policy, but changing the rules. So I think I'm with Councillor Thompson. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Any other comments? Councillor McCann?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I wasn't going to speak, but I just want to maybe ask a question, and I really don't have anything else to add other than what Councillor Harris just discussed. But why now? Why here? Why you? Why is Blaine? It's Blaine, right? The individual that is the president. I've met Blaine. Blaine is an impressive individual. I find it hard to believe that he didn't know that he had to pay these DCs before he started that project. So I guess maybe the question I have for you that I don't think has been asked before is why here, why now, why you? And did Blaine not know this before he started this venture?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lehman. To be honest, I think he was under the impression that because it was a treatment center that there wasn't DCs, and he wasn't expecting to pay DCs with the original building. So in going forward, just through the motions with staff, this happened, and then, you know, the DC bill came and it was paid. And so he's obviously reached out to me. He definitely shared it that he would do another presentation to staff or to us if need be. I said, I will bring this forward on your behalf and see what we can do. But it wasn't anticipated. And I know he's very impressive, but I guess maybe his experiences in the other in York region were different. And I think he was going along the lines of that it would have been the other building and things changed. So we chatted, and I said I would be, of course, fine with bringing this forward to see if we could do this.
I appreciate that insight. Doesn't really change my decision, but maybe I can ask Mr. Miller a question. Is there any sense of urgency for these DCs to be paid for right now? Is that why it's up right now? Sorry, they're already paid, right? Sorry, I knew that actually. Well, I guess I empathize, Councilor Harris. I bought my first house when I was 22, and the land transfer tax nearly gave me a heart attack because I didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. But I find it really hard to believe that that Blaine didn't know that these DCs were coming his way. I guess that's where I'm kind of holding strong. I'll just take maybe a minute just to really echo exactly what Councillor Harris and Thompson said, is that sole sourcing, that was, I think, a real gift that we gave Blaine and his group, because we felt so strongly that he was the guy, that his organization was the organization that was going to take this ball and cross the finish line and score the touchdown over and over and over again. That's what I felt, right? Obviously, if Councilor Thompson's math is correct, and it's $150,000 to $200,000 of interest free that we're actually giving them, that's a lot of money as well, right? Plus the $400,000 of capital cost, right? That's another, great gift. The CIP he can still apply for, and as Councilor Harris said, the other Councilor Harris said he can go to the Ministry of Health and ask for money. So if the DCs are already paid, I drove by the Allendale Rec Center and I saw he's already got one of his boxes open, business is flowing. I'm going to say no now. Doesn't necessarily mean no later. In 6 months, maybe you can bring it back. But I think there's a lot of resources and pathways that this organization can go and maybe recover some of that money. All right. So once again, love the big heart, and it's not going unnoticed, but it'll be a no for me tonight. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. Those in favor of I better clarify where we are. The motion is, as Deputy Mayor Ward amended it. There's no amendment to say no. So if you are in favor of giving the grant, you vote for the motion. If you are opposed to giving the grant to offset the DCs, you vote against it. Clear? Okay, we'll call the question. Nope, not clear. Go ahead.
If you could just, I heard not all of that through where
Okay,
you were facing, but
so-
I had it as Councillor Thompson tabling a new amendment. Is that
No,
where we're at?
there was
We're
no
not?
amendment. So
Okay.
right at the beginning of that discussion, I encourage Councillor Thompson to just withdraw, because it's not really an amendment. If you're opposed to giving the grant, you just vote against it. If you're in favor, you vote for it. Okay? Those in favor of the motion, giving the grant, those in favor, 1, 2, 3. Those opposed? 3, 4. And Councillor Aylwin, sorry. So 1, 2, 3, 4 opposed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is defeated. Okay, the motion is defeated. All right, we have 3 more items that are on tonight's agenda that have been held. The next item that was held was put on by Councillor Kungle, is with regards to the Nature Barrie Bird Friendly designation. Councillor Jim Harris, you held this item.
Great. Thank you, Mary Lee. I'm going to put it on the floor as printed, and I just want to say thank you to Councillor Congo. And I had a question and I forwarded it to her yesterday because I was curious. It made me curious. And I went on the website and gathered some information. And what it did for me was think that we need a bit more than we have today to really make an informed decision. So instead of making a long-winded explanation, I will offer, if we can make a referral, and I'd like to refer to city building. And I'm able to outline some direction for city building.
Sorry, what's your question, Councillor Harris?
Can I outline some direction for the city building? That's fine. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you intend to put a referral motion on, just hold off for a minute, maybe explain why you want to send it to committee, and then you
Okay.
can move the motion, because it would cut off debate. when
Okay,
you refer
thanks.
it.
So, and Councillor Congo shared the PowerPoints available on the Nature Canada website, but there's also information in the application process. It's a 13-page description, and it's great, and it's great information. But what I think it did for me was suggest that given how much of the application relates to policy and at the municipal level, that it might be a bit better understand the true role of city staff as it relates to helping the application. And there's different levels of certification. So certainly you'd want to get the highest one, and it does require a fair bit of work. So it would be helpful to, I think, understand the benefits of this certification and the requirements that are involved in making this application successful. So I was thinking if we could refer to the next city building committee to have Nature Barrie come and present, and to really give a more fulsome explanation of what's involved. that we'd be better positioned to make a decision, because it says council supports, but I don't think right now we have the information available to support. And there could be the chance of having somebody come next week at council, but I think that's a little bit rushed and a little bit limited. So it would allow a chance to get a fulsome understanding of what's all involved. I am supportive, but the process would be a little bit more robust and we have more information, make a better decision and a better plan to get this in place for the city to have the designation. That's my rationale.
Okay, so you would then move a referral motion to send it to City Building Committee?
Yeah, exactly. So I'd invite members of Nature Barrie to attend City Building Committee to make a presentation that outlines the benefits of being designated a bird-friendly city, what it takes to become a bird-friendly city, including the specific role and work required of City of Barrie staff, and 3, the benefits of partnering with Nature Barrie to earn the designation.
Okay, so the amendment would be to replace the motion that's on the floor with a referral to City Building Committee, or that the item be, sorry, you're not, are you referring the item that was on the floor, or did you want to replace the motion, Councillor Hess?
I wanted to replace the motion.
Okay,
Yeah,
so the new motion would be that,
I can send it.
go ahead, yeah, give us a motion again.
I work on my cut and paste. It's on its way. So it's been sent.
Okay. So it's to invite members of Nature Barrie to attend City Building Committee to make a presentation that outlines benefits of being designated as a bird-friendly city, what it takes to become a bird-friendly city, including the role and work required of City of Barrie staff, and the benefits of partnering with Nature Barrie to earn this designation. So actually, that's just an amendment. It's not a referral motion. It's actually to delete the motion that's on the floor and do this instead. So we can talk about that on the amendment. Sorry, Councillor Harris, you introduced it already, but you still have the floor. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman.
Councillor Kungle and Councillor Riepma on the amendment.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to speak to this. I won't support the amendment if it's a removal of progress or in consideration. I think there's been good information, but maybe I can clarify if there's some assumptions about the intention of what certification means. So the Nature Canada did get funding, and they have an approach in motion right now around trying to get 30 different municipalities to seek certification at different levels. It's actually quite difficult, and it's not the desire to actually achieve the highest level of standard. It's really about progress and actually connecting with Nature Canada that will provide a lot of access to grants, supports, peer support networks. What it does do is it's kind of a badge of honor as a symbolic aspect in the beginning to identify that there's a local led level. It's not meant to be city led in the model. So Nature Barrie is considered this. I've been on calls with them in Nature Canada. It is very intensive, as Councillor Harris identified, around a rubric. Part of the scoring is around what currently exists in the city's bylaws that support a bird-friendly city. And there are different elements. A lot of what is actually already in our official plan has been identified as quite progressive and aligned to things around protecting natural habitat, green spaces, and other areas. The preliminary assessment was very positive, and Nature Barrie was encouraged by Nature Canada to proceed. Some of the metric scoring that they would receive would be, and probably one of the most critical ones, would be a head nod by a municipality that we think that this is a good idea. So there's limited effort and need, but part of the next step would be if we give them a letter of support that's tied to the motion, which we often do in other things, to say we would like to endorse Nature Barrie to proceed. They would then come back, and I think there would be ample opportunity to also have a more formal presentation where they can talk a bit about their plans. One of the first efforts would be, and they're already moving forward in this, is community-led bird-friendly team. So it's about doing bird counts, but it's also, we've already done the environmental scan. They're well positioned. I think it, and I expect them to be presenting, and it'd be the direction to council if you feel you want them to present maybe outside of active transportation and sustainability. There's some great information by which they'll be more informed when they get formal feedback from Nature Canada on where they land and areas that they kind of want to proceed with. But for the most part, the beginning needs when we discuss this from city staff would be perhaps posting the badge on our city website under the active transportation level. They're already proceeding with asking the city to do a proclamation and a flag raising for May the 14th. And other than that, there's no draw on city workload or staff to that aspect, but that would have to come back in general. A lot of it's about public education, communication, perhaps development of a survey in the later future about identifying what bird represents the city of Barrie. So I would encourage council to not defer this, but perhaps to reconsider. Yes, there will be a presentation and we can bring that forward as soon as possible, but it would be better informed, I think, with them knowing council supports them working with Nature Canada.
Thanks, Councillor Kungle. Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm very supportive of the city of Barrie becoming a bird-friendly city. I think we lose way too many birds now, and I think we need to really encourage our citizens to be supportive of birds as well. I do take Councillor Harris's concerns seriously, though, because I've heard from Dorothy McEwen that it is quite a strenuous application process, and it may involve some of our staff as well. So I think I would like to, I think it behooves us as a council to know a little bit more about this, especially in item 2, how much city staff might be involved, because that's sort of a really important piece of this. So I'm inclined to support the referral to City Building Committee. I think we can have a wholesome discussion there, but I would also ask at the same time that staff maybe have a quick look at what the requirements are so that they're in a better position to advise City Building about how much work is involved and how easy is it to do. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Riepma. Others on the amendment? Councillor Harris's amendment. Okay, I'll call the question. Those in favor of Councillor Harris's amendment to send it to City Building Committee? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, opposed. I'm going to need to see that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which means I break it and I'm in favor of the amendment. So we're going to get the presentation at City Building Committee. Anything further? I guess it's not really the main motion as amended. It was an alternative motion. But since I introduced it as an amendment for completeness on the motion as amended, I have to call the question again. Those in favor? Any opposed? None. That ratifies the action and off it goes. Thank you for that. Okay, we have 2 items more remaining. The Barrie landmark sign was motion placed by Councillor McCann and it was held by Councillor Aylwin. Go ahead, Councillor Aylwin.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I have 2 quick questions for staff on this. The first question is around the specific location within Heritage Park, how that was determined, and how considerations from the landscape architect who's undertaking the master planning for Heritage Park, how those concerns were taken into consideration. The second question is around the financing of the sign and the donation received from a company called Barrie. And my question on that is, do we know what this company is, or who the donors who maybe funneled their donations through that company are, and how they would be recognized, if at all?
So, Councillor Aylwin, I'm going to actually suggest that those are questions that you could ask during inquiries of staff. They're not relevant to the motion. The motion that's on the floor, and I'm trying to hold everybody to this. The item tonight is just about increasing the size of the heart in the Barrie landmark sign from 8 feet to 10 feet. You can ask those questions in a few minutes when we get to inquiries of staff. But the item on the floor is merely to deal with the size of the heart piece in it. And I want to try and hold council to speak to the motions that are on the floor. So I assume you put that on the floor before asking those questions. If you don't mind saving them for inquiries, I just ask you to speak to the motion that's on the floor.
Absolutely. That's fair. I can actually speak to it during circulation list since that's the memo on the circulation list. So I'd be happy to do that. I am not supportive of this, as I haven't been supportive of this sign throughout the process. I've heard from my constituents that it's not something they'd like to see in Heritage Park, and I don't think the funds associated with maintenance are worth the sign, so I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Okay, the item is on the floor as printed. It is specifically about the size of the heart in the sign being 10 feet instead of 8 feet. On that issue, and that issue alone, Councillor Riepma and Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will limit it to the size of the heart. And I'm sure that Councillor McCann has a great big heart, but I'm not in favor. I think this sign is already too big. I don't think we need this sign to start with. And so I'm going to urge everyone around this table to not support this amendment. The sign keeps coming back. It keeps getting bigger. It keeps, there's all kinds of things going on with it. I think we need to stick with our original approval and let's get on with it.
Thanks, Councillor Riepma. Councillor Morales, 8 or 10 feet on the heart.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. The sign that keeps on giving. The comment that we should vote against this because it keeps coming back to me, Mayor Lehman, is just not what's before us. As you said specifically, if people have general questions about the sign or the process, those are fair. I believe they're going to be brought up later. But 8 to 10 feet, if we're pulling up the circulation memo, it's because when they did the sign process, they assumed 8 was adequate. And it turns out 10 feet is the adequate number because 8 feet would prevent people like yourself, Mayor Lehman, some of our staffers who are taller, standing underneath our sign. Not dragging you into this, what I'm saying is it's just to make sure people who are of a taller stature can be in the heart. You can still hate the sign in general, but if you vote against, this, you are saying that people of certain heights should not be. Anyways, I'm in favor.
Thank you for staying on topic anyway, Councillor Morales. Anyone else want to comment as to whether 8 feet or 10 feet is appropriate for the heart piece of the Barrie sign? Councillor McCann.
Just 2 words. Love more, hate less. And also the heart, the 10-foot heart, as Councilor Morales was saying, is that it allows people that are 6'5" in height to actually be in the heart. If we kept it at the 8 feet, and I'm talking to you, Mr. Clary, you'd only allow someone that's 5'4" be able to sit in the heart. And this is about an experience. It's about having some fun, connecting to your city, and being inspirational. And I would hate to think that anybody that was 5'5" and higher wouldn't be able to have some fun in this heart. So I hope that we all love more.
Any other comments on the motion that's on the floor? Okay, I'll call the question. Those in favor of the motion on the floor? Any opposed? 1, 2. Okay, that carries. The final item that was held tonight was put on by myself and held by Councillor Gary Harvey with regards to school safety. Go ahead, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I'll put the motion on the floor as printed, and I just actually circulated the amendment that I'm going to propose, the letters in red, and that's just to add 1 sentence onto the end of paragraph 1 with the wording, in accordance with the approved site plans. It is understood all conditions of site plans must be adhered to.
Okay, thanks for that. So the motions on the floor is printed, and then Councillor Harvey's moved an amendment which adds the words to the end of paragraph 1, in accordance with the approved site plans. It's understood all conditions of site plans must be adhered to. Would you care to speak to the amendment?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Working with Miss Banfield, because one of the schools in question is in my ward. That has been a couple year struggle, especially now that things are opening up, and it was very apparent that the principal involved was not going to be approving opening this. And the real meat and potatoes to this is the fact that there's site plan agreements that are approved by city staff at the time of approval. And they're obviously done for certain reasons. I'll let Ms. Banfield speak to that because obviously I'm not the professional when it comes to that. However, I would suspect that things like traffic flow and safety for the students and the parents bringing their kids to and from school would be definitely a big consideration when these site plans are approved. But I would invite Ms. Banfield to maybe expand on that piece of it if she could.
Ms. Banfield.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harvey, there are some schools that do have a site plan agreement that show a kiss and ride or a drop off, and they're not always used in accordance with the site plan. Staff at the city have good connections with staff at the school boards, and usually when something like this is brought to our attention, I give them a copy of their site plan agreement and ask them to deal with their principals to get compliance with the site plan agreement. Or they could come in and ask for an amendment to the site plan agreement, and we could look at everything else on the site at the same time. So so that's kind of where we are at. We do like to remind the school boards just to, as I said, to operate in accordance with their approved site plan.
Great, thank you. And I know this isn't just a Ward 7 issue. There's a few of my colleagues around the table that have had these issues off and on just in this term alone. And from what I understand, it sounds like it's been an on again, off again issue for quite a number of years. So I do thank Mayor Lehman for bringing this forward because it is a citywide issue by the sounds of it.
Thanks, Councillor Harvey. On Councillor Harvey's amendment, any further comments? Okay, seeing none, those in favor of the amendment? Or any opposed? None. That carries on the main motion as amended. Anyone else wish to comment? On the at the risk of triggering further discussion, I do want to say something on this one only because look, this council, we've tried to deal with this one before and we've had some frustrations. I really appreciate the amendment to add the wording on the site plan piece. In speaking with Ms. Banfield previously on this, you know, newer schools are built with this and we have a site plan agreement that we can use as a tool to require the schools to use their kiss and rides. With the older schools, we don't have that because either the site plan agreement, well, there probably wasn't a site plan agreement or the agreement at the time didn't stipulate it. And to be fair to some of our schools, they just weren't planned with kiss and rides for the level of traffic that we see today. We all know what the root cause is. We need to try and encourage more walking to school and create the ways to do that. But, you know, reality is reality. And, you know, some schools are absolutely tremendous about this. I got asked about this by the media today. And Willow Landing, you know, 4 volunteers out there. They've got a path through the parking lot. They let the school buses in. They hold the traffic. Then when the bus goes, they let the parents come in, use the kiss and ride. Really well done. Lots of good examples. For the schools that, and this is what's different about tonight's motion compared to what we've done previously. Obviously, we want the ones who have kiss and ride to use it. But there are locations around the city where there are adjacent opportunities for kiss and ride, sometimes in a city park, you know, or a city facility. I think of Terry Fox in East Bayfield. I think of Sandringham Park and not Hewitt's Creek. It slipped my mind. Mike, Sandringham. Is it Hewitt's Creek? It is Hewitt's Creek and Sandringham Park, where there's a parking lot for Sandringham Park. So I'd like our staff on a school by school basis where these issues exist to see if there's an alternative. I know we've tried to do this before. I wanted to note as well, because some of you may be saying, isn't that familiar? And part of the challenge has actually been convincing parents to use it. But that's something we can collectively work on. And I won't give you all the reasons why this is so important, except to say, I saw some really unacceptable situations this winter. It's always worst in February. But where schools refuse to use the on-site available space or there's no other plan, it all ends up on the street and it's just really dangerous. So let's see if we can do something about it. And I'll call the question on the motion as amended. Those in favor? Any opposed? None. That carries. Thank you. That completes the items that were held tonight. And with the 27 minutes available to us, let's go to inquiries of staff. Deputy Mayor Ward.
I
Any
have none.
inquiries of staff? No? Members of council, any inquiries of staff? Councillor Kungle, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Lehman. To Mr. Millar, I was wondering about the commentary we had in the great conversation with the greenhouse gas reduction. And I aligned with how important it is for us to understand what we're funding. And I didn't know if, while we don't set the next budget for the next council, going through the budget process, is there a way staff could look at identifying an indicator on those items that the next council will be motioning on that are related to that plan and strategy, just so there's an awareness of when we get intake forms or when we're having deliberations, sometimes on line by line items. If we're looking at making changes to the budget coming forward, knowing if they have an impact directly to funding plans that are integral around that greenhouse gas emissions initiative.
So through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Kungle. So the answer to your question, simple answer is yes. I mean, I think staff have actually already been discussing the 2023 budget business plan and budget. And one of the objectives is to clearly provide such linkages that you described to council strategic plans and how we're moving along. So yes, we can do that. And we've come forward with a budget direction report. I think it's planned for May of this year. And at that time, you're welcome to add any clarification to what we bring forward as well.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kungle. Any other inquiries from members of the General Committee? Okay, seeing none. Next, we have announcements. Deputy Mayor Ward.
I have
any
none.
announcements? Nope. Announcements, members of General Committee. My goodness, I only have a few too. First of all, we're proclaiming an entire year, 2022, as the year of the garden in the city of Barrie. I don't think we've proclaimed an entire year before, but gardens have certainly taken on new focus during COVID. We have proclaimed 2022 as the year of the garden. City of Barrie is also working on phase 1 of the wayfinding project, ensuring that the downtown and waterfront areas are easily navigable and to assist in economic recovery. Residents are encouraged to provide their feedback through an online survey available at buildingbarrie.ca/wayfinding strategy. Deadline for feedback on that is Thursday, April 14th. City is inviting eligible local organizations to apply for the Rec and Sport Community Grant, which will provide funding to enhance access to recreation and sport opportunities in Barrie. Applications will be accepted until April 7th, and that is at barrie.ca/community grant. Finally, we are updating the 2015 Waterfront and Marina Strategic Plan. The city wants to hear from residents, businesses, and organizations about their ideas for the waterfront. There is a virtual public information center scheduled for Thursday, that's 24th, from 2 to 3:30, and again from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Information on that is at buildingbarrie.ca/waterfront plan. Circulation list, comments regarding circulation lists dated 1st March the 7th. Anything from the March 7th circulation list? Seeing none. The March 10th circulation list. Seeing none. Tonight's March 21st. Councillor Aylwin.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I won't repeat the questions unless staff would like me to, but I have those questions based on the circulation list item on the Barrie side.
Ms. James Reed.
Thank you, Councillor Elwin, for the question. The exact location of the Barrie sign was in fact approved through motion 21G040, which was identified as Appendix A in the staff report. And that was the report that came forward last year around June 7th. So in there, Appendix A identified the location within Heritage Park, and that was after a consultation that we did both with staff within the organization, but also, as you will recall, we spoke with representatives of the Public Art Committee and the McLaren to come up with that recommendation. And we considered the different events that occur at Heritage Park, and some of the operational issues that could have impact on that. And also we had input, particularly from Public Art, with respect to what the sign would look like as you come in through the bay on the waterfront, and that it would look like a backwards. And there was some concern that as people taking pictures from their boat, it would just look like and might not make the best image of the city. In terms of the consultation that occurred through the PIC for Heritage Park, I'm going to turn that over to Ms. Banfield to answer that question, as she's led that answer, and then maybe I can jump back for your second question.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Aylwin. So it really was just a matter of timing. The PIC, the master plan work for Heritage Park actually commenced a long time ago, but actually was delayed to COVID. So it's kind of like it was a combination of the sign had happened while there was already some advancement on Heritage Park. So of course, what's important to know about that is that the reconstruction of Heritage Park is not approved at this point. And considering the magnitude of that cost, it could be a number of years before it proceeds. So staff will, of course, have kept the master, as Ms. Rebecca James Reed said, that we'll keep the master plan in mind when developing the RFP for the sign that they did. And so the provision was that potentially the sign could be moved if it would be required when the work for the park commences. So the final master plan for the park is going to come back to council in Q2 of this year. So relatively soon, in the next couple of months. It's not going to show an alternative location at this point in time. But as I said, considering that the sign can be moved, you know, there still would remain opportunity in the future that you could look at relocating the sign at Heritage Park at that time. But we don't expect that to be in the very, very near future. And I know that the existing sign is intended to be installed in a couple of months.
Thank you, Ms. Banfield. In terms of your second question with respect to the Barrie organization, as indicated in the memo on tonight's circulation, on October 12th of 2021, the city received $5,000 from an individual as a donor and $145,000 from a company that was called Barrie. The donor of the $5,000 did request and received a donation receipt, and that was validated through our finance department. But Barrie did not request a donation receipt, and so therefore there was no review or anything that occurred with that. In terms of the detail of the donors, staff do not have that information, and so I would refer your question to Councillor McCann.
Councillor McCann.
What is the question again specifically, please?
Councillor Owen, your question?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. My question is, how are these donors who have funneled their donation through Barrie going to be recognized, if at all?
I think that was laid out in the staff report, I believe, in June 7th, that they'll be recognized with a placard below the sign. I don't have the exact writing. I'm not sure if anybody else, if one of the staff members can bring that up for Council Elwin, but that was discussed, that was voted on and approved back in June.
Okay, so we do have a list of donors. Okay, that's okay. Great, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Elwin, just to clarify, city staff do not have a list of donors.
Okay, so just to clarify, Councillor McCann, the individual donors are going to be recognized?
Correct.
Those who made up that 145,000 don't, okay. Okay, thanks, Councillor Aylwin. Thank you, Ms. James Reed. Any other questions on the circular or comments on the circulation list from tonight? Go ahead.
Item C7, which is from Todd Tuckey, the Up Kempenfest. I'm not sure if he wants to speak to City Council, but I think it's more of a reference committee, perhaps corporate services.
I
I'm not
wondered
sure.
about that too. The request is with regards to limiting access to certain areas during Kempenfest to try and manage the safety issues. And I kind of agree with Mr. Tuckey on that one. Maybe to the clerk, where would that best occur? I'm not sure it necessarily needs to be a general committee.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, I believe it would be City Building Committee, because it would be the operations staff putting up the barriers, assisting with that.
Okay. You want to send that to City Building Committee? Invite Mr. Tuckey to come to City Building? Okay, so C7 to City Building Committee for a presentation. Those in favor?
So what are we voting on?
Opposed? None? That carries. That was C7, item C7, Councillor McCann. Any other items from the circulation list, members of council? Go ahead, Councillor Congo.
Just very briefly, and while I see that we've got Mr. Forsyth here, I wanted to compliment the Transit Day and recognizing, what is it, over 140 staff. So that was this past Friday. So some of them may have seen a mad woman waving at them, but I did want to just take a moment to say, while that was a special day for transit operator recognition, I did want to compliment on the past 2 years of both them managing through COVID and the safety of residents on the bus. They did an incredible job.
Thanks, Councillor Congo. Any other comments on the circulation list from tonight, March 21st? Seeing none, we will see you for City Council next Monday night. General Committee is adjourned.